Afternoon, everybody. We're going to convene our session here today. Mr. Manager, I understand we have a well-anticipated report coming.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, as you know, this is that time of the year when we start our budget cadence, right? So basically, this is the year when our budget, all of our departments come before City Council and brief City Council about their budget needs and their budget requests. I need to remind the City Council that basically we're trying to make sure we give you all as much time as possible so you all can have an informed deliberations as you all make probably the biggest budget or policy decision that you all make each year, which is adopt the city's budget. So even though we have aspirational timeframes for the different budget briefings, they're aspirational. Take the time that you need. Remember we added a couple days extra in the budget process, so if we need to punt departments into next week, we can always do that. But Mayor, as you mentioned, we do have a highly anticipated briefing, which is the Central Beach Small Area Plan. We have Clay Dills with Dills Architect, who's going to come and give the city an overview of some of the findings for this. But first, we're going to hear from Emily Archer, who's going to level set before Clay steps up.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council. Since the RACE-AP adoption, the Resort Area Strategic Action Plan in 2020, the Central Beach area of the city has seen an influx in development interest, and this is really one of our most attractive redevelopment opportunities in the city around the Convention and Sports Center. So with your direction, the Department of Economic Development engaged the services of Dills Architects and Kristen Clearhair from Renaissance Planning to come up with a small area plan that directly addresses the development and land uses that can go in this area. So with that, I'll hand it over to Clay Dills.
And Mr. Mayor, members of council, as Clay comes up, I want to remind council that this briefing right now is informational. Obviously, we'll take input and feedback from the council, but next steps really comes from the fact that we've received several proposals from members of the development community regarding activities to be done in this area. The next steps would be for us to have a conversation about what elements this council possibly want to move forward with, if any.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wilson, Council. Happy to be here today and to share this. It's been in the work for several months now. Today we're going to talk about our preferred plan design. First, just where we've been a little bit, and excuse me if I look to this one. Occasionally I'm still faking like I don't need glasses. Project milestones, we were last before you on November 21st. Since then, we've held public engagement, taken feedback. December 3rd, we presented to PDRC. Between November and January, end of January, we did a whole nother round of stakeholder groups, interests, business, everyone we could get our hands on. And then 110, our community survey was completed. And so we put those in 3 categories, and I'll run through these quickly. This is kind of where we've been on the project. Info gathering, testing those concepts, and then engagement and getting that feedback and compiling it together. There's a lot of studies, lots of proposals, lots over time that we've invested a lot of time in just unearthing all those things, RACE-AP, ramp, every last bit of it. All of that is part of this investigation. To remind you of our study area and what was studied by all those previous studies is sort of just north of former MoCA down to Norfolk Avenue and the VB Trail, almost to Atlantic Park on the east side and back to Bird Neck Road on the west. We did lots of street network analysis. This is really about promoting connectivity. How do we preserve neighborhoods and connect neighborhoods? Pedestrian, bike, transit-oriented neighborhoods. How do we connect trails? And then how do those communities extend grid, enhance those neighborhoods and connectivity by doing that? We did analysis of open space. So those are linear park systems. And our green spaces, those open areas, how they link together. So those have to do with stormwater, parks and trails, Central green was part of that focus, and then amenities, civic amenities that could accompany that, which ask questions about a visitor center. Parking, for sure, this is a major deal for Central Beach and a need that's currently there. A shift to structured parking we think would help. We found that distributing parking around minimizes impact, putting it in a structure does, so we eliminate surface parking over time. The number that has been in most studies is that there's roughly a need for about 10,000 spaces out there. And then looking at parking management for shared garages and on-street. We tested 2 final concepts last time. And to remind everyone, it wasn't pick a winner. It wasn't like, let us know which one you want to do. It was really testing concepts. What do you like in each of these that we eventually should move into a hybrid approach, which is the preferred plan that we're presenting today. And then, so we took that feedback, we synthesized all of the data from that, we put it together, including the online survey that developed priorities for this. And we formulated an engagement top 10 out of that, which lists all the things that have high interest, high positive feedback, and high need in Central Beach. Big takeaways and design drivers for the preferred plan. So this is us wrapping those up and saying, these are the goals. These are the big picture items that really need to affect what we do. We hear a lot about diversity of place, what's authentic to Central Beach, the character there. It really has to do with living there as well as visitation there. Creating destinations that experience, we can host people, you can participate those, you can live and you can work there. There's often a question came up from engagement and from stakeholders is why do people visit a place? It's a basic fundamental question about Central Beach. They visit because there's an event or they visit for the culture, and hopefully they're doing both. This is a big part of what Central Beach is, especially when you look at it as a diverse community. So if you can check those 2 boxes, visitation looks like it wants to stay there, and it does, and then it comes back again. Connectivity, this is important to communities in the surrounding area and to the rest of the city. How do the communities also connect to this place as a destination and the destinations within it? How does all that work together as a district? Vibrancy. So this has to do with activation on each block. How do we activate 19th, Parks, and every block around Central Beach? How does it stay open? So there is no real closing time. It isn't an event where I come, I go to the event, and I go home, or I go back to my hotel. How do I stay there? How do we get them there longer to participate in the culture? And then last, the visits and activation. This is really a lot of comments from the business community, from proposals that have been had out there about helping to drive the market to redevelop Central Beach per a vision much like we're presenting here today. So to our preferred plan. I will say on the bottom there, the intent here is that this is actionable, but also aspirational. Actionable meaning, what do we do with city-owned property in Central Beach? How does that help the development of community and the surrounding property owners develop a vision along with that? So this looks maybe 10 to 15 years down the road, not really further, but it sets a pattern for how it would develop over time. So Central Beach Small Area Plan, you're seeing it in its totality here. 22nd Street on the top, that's Atlantic Park's footprint, and Pacific Avenue on the right, back to Bird Neck Road, and then down to Norfolk Avenue in the south. If there's a center and a core to it, it is most definitely the intersection of 19th and Parks. for sure. Those two streets, those are our main streets. If we can look at it this way, and we certainly do in the preferred plan, it unlocks the rest of Central Beach to be considered in its totality. Stormwater, we're starting to link those together, top to bottom. These are potential blueways, including the CIP project there in the south. And then north-south trail connection, which is very important to Virginia Beach as a whole. So you're seeing a connection there between the stormwater parks, those linkages, and trail and movement north-south, which is integral to the success of the communities being able to connect to Central Beach. It connects, this would allow you to connect from the VB Trail, which will end up at Rudy Park, all the way north to the Ocean Walk at Laskin Road. So that is a trail connection that you can easily take. And so all that being said, the goal here is to look at it in a highly diverse and integrated way as a cultural district. We think when you look at it that way, that it unlocks the opportunities around parks and 19th. So these are the destinations in the plan, including the Vibe District as part of that. Overall district, right? This is a cultural district full of destinations and reasons to be there. You can then look at those as campus areas. So we have a cultural district in its totality of Central Beach, and then inside of those, there's campus areas, each that are unique, all linked together. So that's the Gateway up there between 264 East and West, mixed use, which is primarily private property, civic zone in the south, and then sports anchoring the west side. Very much how Atlantic Park on the east end is anchoring 19th Street on that end. So east to west on 19th. And then we mix in housing, which is a need there and a high desire from our engagement. People want to live there, they want to work there, they want to be a part of that culture that's happening there. And along with that, we mix in parking. You heard me say earlier, integrated parking, structured parking, putting that around with the housing into these neighborhoods and into the district so it can all be experienced on foot or on bike and not always in the car. So zooming in on these, this is the northeast quadrant. So that's parks running vertically there, 264, 21st and 22nd in the upper left. We're showing a gateway building there. We think the best use, or one of the best use for what is currently the visitor center is actually parking. We think it should be complemented by commercial and event space, and it should serve as a way to immediately park, get out of your car, and connect to 19th Street and all of the other destinations in Central Beach. So you would park and you see where we call it an elevated connector. So I can walk out onto a second floor deck. That's a public amenity. And I can walk through the district down to past what we're now calling a civic center onto 19th Street and connect every one of those blocks to 19th, which unlocks all of those destinations. That's 900 spaces we're proposing at that center. This is primarily mixed use. This is private property on the right-hand side there. And then we are showing a hotel. This will be a headquarters type hotel. And you can see from that elevated walkway, the connections back to those buildings, back to those blocks, and down into those districts. West of the Civic Center, on the top, you see stormwater, parks, and trails that would accompany that gateway building. We're showing a venue for our action sports. This could be an extension of the sports center. We think action sports is a very good fit for this. It's part of the culture of Virginia Beach. It's part of what we do. I grew up surfing and skateboarding. We think it would be a primary attraction if that could happen. Behind that, another large parking block with residential and a potential, we know there there's potential to have an extension of the hotel that exists there now. Below that in the southwest, this is really the heart of a sports area or our sports campus, essentially our existing sports center. You can see there the action sports across 19th from it. Setting up, which not on city-owned property, but is a sports venue that was indicated from several of the studies. That could be an ice sheet or a natatorium over time. So we're recommending that that would be a great point to put it in that campus and anchor the end down there. You'll see the other parking locations surrounded by residential and the stormwater park and trails that eventually lead you down to Norfolk Avenue. And then the southeast corner, this is really back to the intersection of Parks and 19th. This is our civic area. Across from the Civic Center, there'd be a small public park, Central Green. Off of that is a primary parking location with residential. We've heard a lot from folks about having a place for an indoor-outdoor community market, but then moving the visitor center to this location. Put it in the heart of Central Beach, not between the interstates, but here so that everyone can visit it, see what the culture is all about, visit the destinations from the oceanfront back to here. Just some overall plan data. This is all of our area completely. Notice the net of 10,380 parking spaces. The goal was 10,000 over the district. And these are bird's eyes, and I won't tell you all of those, but it's by story and by massing so that you get a sense of the scale of what we're proposing. So the Civic Center in the center, this is our high point. This is what we build mass around. We scale down into neighborhoods from there. When we move outward from that, we become more porous, more fine-grained. The buildings get smaller, more broken up, more like the community that's there now. You'll note the elevated connector between. This is looking west from the Civic Center. You see the visitor center, a museum building, a market, and then the parking with residential strategically located around the venues and near the sports. And then this is from our civic campus looking back towards the mixed use, private property back there. I will say we're using the language of civic center rather than convention center because we think it should be flexible. We think if there, as it was last weekend, if there's a place to expand sports, that we have one to do it now while we plan for other ones. We think that should be a part of it. If we think of this as a district full of destinations and we think of them all working together across a campus, then these things can be flexible. If we think we need an ice sheet, we can do a portable one. We can use what we have while we redevelop. So just to talk briefly before we get to phasing about city-owned property. This is the master plan. What's highlighted in color is city-owned and what we're proposing on it. We took that and ran the data from it. The parking we're proposing on there nets just over 7,000 as opposed to 10, with still almost 1,000 housing units. And then we integrated an aerial showing city-owned property into proposed phasing. Now, phasing is tricky. It's nuanced. It's easily out of sequence based on budgets and those, but we think you can get close to something like this. So this is city-owned. This is existing to remain and repurpose. So repurpose of MoCA. We heard from engagement that wants to be culturally based, community based. Co-working as a cultural place is atop the list for most people. Repurposing the Civic Center. You still hold conventions there, but use it as flexible civic space. You'll note the public safety buildings are staying in the library. They're not at the end of their useful lives. We think they should see that through, but you can see how it would redevelop when we move to the next phase. So phase one, gateway building with parking, an elevated connector, hotel headquarters along with parking. Any parking that we can get east of Parks Avenue is probably our biggest impact in Central Beach. So you'll see the blue there on the southeast corner of the Civic Center. That's residential, but a lot of structured parking, and then structured parking down below with residential near the Sports Center. We're doing alphabeticals on the phases for private property. So what's in purple is what some semblance of what we think should happen there as a pattern of development through the private property areas, primarily the mixed use area east of the Civic Center. Phase two from this would be completion of the civic lawn. Part of this phasing has to do with keeping parking in place. All of these things replace surface parking. So we're trying to replace and at least triple surface parking while we're doing it. And then replacing that with the civic lawn, the visitor center, potentially action sports, that venue, and a large parking structure back near East 264. Private property in phase 2B, that's the Chaplin property down at the bottom. We're showing an extension of the street grid through those. That's A12. So there's opportunity to get strong housing down there as well. And then the sports venue, natatorium, ice sheet at the current office building that sits west of the sports center. Last but not least, filling out multifamily housing and more parking out near the residential end on Bird Neck, being respectful of those communities out there. So from an aerial view of Central Beach, you can see the Civic Center, you see the Gateway building, the elevated walkway there. Parks Avenue creates a hub that intersects with 19th. These two really unlock the district. This is the heart of our district, our core to it. That's parking near the southeast there on Parks. The Gateway building in the north, that also leads you over to Mocha, connects the whole north side of the beach down to Central Beach. And then the west end, which is sports, the civic lawn, a visitor center right in the heart of it. Those are those areas. Zooming in, there's the Gateway building. We think it could, this is 8 stories of structured parking. We think it could serve as an event advertiser. But what we think it does best is it gets people out of their car, off the interstate, straight into the district. So I can walk out onto this public amenity that's raised on Parks. I don't have to sit at the lights. These are wide traffic aisles through here. This is a direct connection to the destinations of Central Beach and the oceanfront. It's the hotel on bottom left. You see the connector there from the Gateway building, and then mixed use in the private property. So that's live and work, retail, restaurants, that activity that can be developed there. The parking that's integrated here is key to that success. Then moving down Parks, you see the end of the connector there on 19th Street. So the parking in the bottom there, a little bit of residential, mostly parking with a headquarters hotel and parking across 19th onto that civic lawn with a visitor center behind it. All as a sort of activity working together. As you move west, back to our sports campus, the Civic Center, you see the Market Visitors Center, but then the Civic Center on the right, and then flanking parking and residential. And the existing sports center works with action sports, a sports venue in the back. All of these can be activated at once because the parking's in place. This is a view looking west. I like this view because it gives us a clear snapshot, really, of city-owned property and a vision for that. Again, 19th Street. All of these destinations, you're brought there on parks, you're unlocked to destinations, you're brought to those on 19th Street. They link the sports campus back to Bird Neck Road and all the way to Atlantic Park. Again, there's the bottom right is the connection in that gateway building, our civic core, and sports campus. This is looking into that sports campus. So at the top there, that's that venue. This is Ice Sheet or Natatorium. Action Sports below that off the corner of the Civic Center. And you'll note in every one of these, there's living, parking, a little bit of retail associated in all of these. The point is that it's active all the time. These aren't events that I come to and then I go home. This is a cultural place that's integrated across Central Beach. So in this plan, approaching on 21st Street, this is the end of 264 East. That's our gateway building on the left. The Civic Center would be on your right. I'm looking now into a mixed-use district of Central Beach. What we see is a sense of arrival across a pedestrian crossway. This would be your Parks Avenue gateway. Emblematic of Virginia Beach is the hope here, is that the gateway building, I can come in, I turn to it, I get out of my car, and then what you're greeted with at the Parks Avenue gateway really is action. You're greeted by people moving across, people going to destinations, visitors, people from this city and others nearby, but out-of-town folks as well. They come to this, and the sense of arrival is seeing that in action in an elevated walkway that brings you to all these blocks. So that's 21st Street below. I've gotten out of my car. I've walked onto the elevated walkway. I'm looking off to the Vibe District, essentially down Parks Avenue, and I'm looking into that mixed-use development, that campus of mixed-use buildings. That's the Civic Center on the right-hand side. So what that does, it unlocks this, right? We can get to it, right? Right now, crossing diagonally, crossing a couple streets that are 4 lanes in each direction is cumbersome, and people don't want to do it. And so we think it's a way to cross and connect people immediately to these blocks. And then at the end, we're looking at 19th Street. We're looking onto the Civic Park there, onto this public park. The Civic Center is on the right-hand side, and onto 19th Street as a cultural point. You see the monoliths there. This is the gateway to the Vibe District, which has taught us a lot about the culture there and about what people want to do in Central Beach and be a part of. And so you're directly connecting to that culture there. There's something authentic about that Central Beach does in a really, really great way that we can enhance. This is looking back up Parks towards the Civic Center to those elevated walkways. That's the crossover to the headquarters hotel there. It's a hotel on right, but an active street. This is essentially what was happening this weekend, right? During that tournament. A lot of activity down there, lots of cars. What that does is it activates every block through there, right? All across the mixed-use district, back to 19th and up and down 19th as the destination connector for Central Beach. This is a look up 19th in there. I think the question earlier, and we heard an engagement a lot, was like, after the event is over, Central Beach goes dark. There's a closing time to it. I don't really want to be there after hours. There isn't an amenity there. So rethinking what that could be on 19th Street. This is our civic zone through here. You see the market and the park on the left, a visitor center, museum above that, the civic center on the right with the action sports behind it, and looking down to the sports venues. What that means is vibrancy, not just during the event, but all the time. This is a cultural place, has an authenticity to it that people can connect. So the visitor wants to come, wants to stay, and wants to return. And 19th is really the linking of destinations. So this is, in this view alone, we have a visitor center, the park at left, the civic center, action sports, and you're looking down to that sports hub down at the other end. And behind you is Atlantic Park, right? So we're on both ends, east and west, we're linking 19th Street as a connector of destinations. You see the large blocks of residential and parking, but placed strategically around the civic center and that civic core. This is our gateway building, that connector that moves through those blocks and activates those blocks. Yep. So there's that gateway building adjacent to this civic center. So that's 900 spaces. You're looking at commercial and event space there. But what you're really looking at is a public amenity that deals with the interstate. It gets people out of their car, gets them into the district, which is where they're headed, or to their event, and connected on 19th Street. So it's not far on this walkway, on the Parks Avenue gateway, but it is far when we're on ground level and we're crossing interstate. So next steps, we'll present on April 29th to RAC Planning Design Review Committee, May 1st to RAC, and May 16th we'll have a final report, our final submittal of documents to economic development. Thank you.
Okay, great. And let's open it up. Worth and then Stacy and then Rosemary.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer. Thank you, Mr. Dills and the team for your work here. I know it's been a lot of months, as you explained. I've got 3 questions. I'll go quickly and then a comment. But first and foremost, I heard you use the word parking a lot, and I hear the word parking a lot as the councilman for this district. What is the quickest place? What's the location and the quickest way to get a parking deck on this plan?
Let me back up. It's southeast of the convention center.
Parks and 19th?
Yep. You also take away the least surface parking doing it.
Right, that's right.
And anything east of Parks is of the biggest benefit to that district for sure.
That's publicly owned land.
Yes.
Daryl.
If I can get back there.
Thank you. I'd ask everyone, we ought to look at this first as we consider this. Second, you're leaving alone the publicly owned properties where the 2nd Precinct, Police Precinct, the library, and the rescue squad and the fire. You're leaving that alone.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so you can see in this, actually you see the parking with some residential around it there on the southeast corner, right? Parks and 19th. You see the public safety and the library behind it. We're leaving it because they're not at the end of their useful lives. It's a major CIP effort to move those and redevelop there. You can see the pattern of development that would happen, right? our residential and parking that's west of it, up near the sports center, you would repeat in some form along 17th Street. It does a lot for 17th Street. And you would bring that down along that park space. And then you have a true enclosed central park for Central Beach, which would really be wonderful. Really activate that.
So just one more, on page 33, you show a sheet of ice. You can fit that on there, because I've heard different sizes, but, because that potentially would be a nice use there, but
At the sports venue,
yes,
yes, it does fit. So
where the office building is now.
yeah, our athletic and sports guide tested it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's it, but I just want to make a comment. I heard you use the word parking a lot, since arrival, sports, civic center. I think this is all tourism. It's also live, work, play.
Yep.
What else am I missing? But I think this is why I think this plan is very important, that we integrate all of those aspects as you just described to us, because this is precious, precious land that we own, but also the private sector. As you show here, a lot of that's housing. But I think this is a great path forward, potentially, as you say, over 10 or 15 years. Of course, I'd like to see a parking deck within the next year, but
We could use it.
and this is in no way, because with the Atlantic Park opening up May 4th, yes, May 4th, this is, I mean, hopefully we can look at this area for future development, but in no way is this going to take away from Atlantic Avenue and the resort. This, in my opinion, enhances the vibe and the resort, and our city gives it a lot of excitement.
Yeah, I will say so the approach here a little bit from the interface between public and private really has to do with the city helping spur development, sort of leading that and letting it happen. So the headquarters building, there is a small sliver of property the city owns there, but it would need to be a partnership, and the market would have to tell us a headquarters hotel is needed there. I think it's close now, but I think that partnership actually helps make that decision. So that's kind of built into this.
Okay, Stacy, Rosemary, and Josh.
To piggyback on what Councilman Remick was saying, if you can go to slide either 38 or 60, I don't care. That parking deck on the southeast corner, regardless of what else ever happens in this area, that parking deck is needed. It's key. If we had it there today, it would be filled up all the time.
Yep.
It's central to not only the convention center, the sports center, but it's also central to the Vibe District. It's very walkable to Atlantic Park. It's very walkable to the oceanfront. So I was there this weekend at the sports center with the wrestling tournament.
Yep.
There was constantly 50 cars circling around looking for a parking spot.
Yep.
And
I drove it and watched and just sat and tried to just observe what was happening down there. And it's cars everywhere with nowhere to go.
exactly, if we had that parking deck today, it would be years too late.
Yep.
So
Agreed.
I would strongly try to encourage us that regardless, again, of what else goes on in this area, whatever we agree to, everyone's going to agree that that parking deck is needed, and it's needed now. Secondly, I want to talk about the ice sheet. Is there no way to put the ice sheets in the existing convention center?
You can. Yeah, we did test fit it.
So,
I think you become limited on how much your spectator venue can be, but it certainly will fit. Yep.
something we could do today.
Yep.
Versus-
Yeah, you own the space.
Right. So that's an option. The other, if you could show the gateway, this gateway building, I guess, right, Where is the entryway to the Gateway building? There's all this parking coming off of 264.
Not off of the interstates, it's off of Parks.
You park and walk down the gangway.
So you have to
Yes.
get off the interstate and then go, so everything would enter in it and exit off of Park Street? Because I didn't see that in the,
Yeah, no, we haven't done a traffic study of it.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is that feasible? But we'd have to do a traffic study.
Yep.
And then the last is, again, I just bring this up to council, it's just my feeling that this idea of a convention hotel reminds me of the Abilene paradox, where there's a family in West Texas and it's a hot summer day and they say, what do you want to do? And nobody's, well, I'll do whatever you want to do. I'll do whatever you want to do. And so they finally, grandfather says, let's go into Abilene and eat at the cafeteria. So they all get in the car and they drive 60 miles on a hot summer day to Abilene. They eat at the cafeteria, they get home. Father says, boy, that was an experience. What do you guys think? So I hated it, I didn't want to go. Why'd you go? Because everybody else wanted to go. Well, nobody wanted to go, but because everybody was shaking their head, that's what they did. And I just think we spent a lot of time talking about a convention hotel. And I don't see it working. And if the private sector wants to build it, they can build it, but
I mean, we purposely showed it, it's straddling city and private property there, so that at a minimum, the market would need to demand it.
I just think we have a great idea for a parking garage, a great idea, great need. I think we can put some ice sheets into the convention center, make that more usable as we speak. It's my 2 cents.
Hey, Rosemary, Josh, and Michael.
Well, Mr. Dills, we've been keeping you busy, haven't we?
Yes, ma'am.
This plan is way better than the last one we saw.
Appreciate that.
Definitely put a lot of thought into it. Definitely, the parking is essential. We have a problem, we've got to fix it. I am curious about the visitor center, because I was sort of thinking that because of technology and all, that the visitor center was obsolete.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell me why you think we still need a visitor center?
So we've been calling it a visitor center and museum. We do think, as a cultural place, as part of the civic campus down there, that there's something to be said about events and art and those things at the core of Central Beach. We think it's always been a part of it. We saw it with Mocha. We see it in the vibe. And integrating that into part of Central Beach and part of visitation for Central Beach as a public amenity, as a place that people would want to go, those destinations up and down 19th, that's really driving it. I don't think it's a visitor center, I walk in, I get a pamphlet kind of place, right? I think people already walk around with that in their pocket, right? Our mobile devices have taken the old model of a visitor center away. But I do think that a cultural place that's central to Central Beach is a great idea, actually. And it's accessible this way. Again, if you can arrive, see where you're going, immediately be dropped down into it and experiencing everything up and down 19th Street, we think it would add to that. So that's where it came from. It's not, we think people would visit it, but it's not the sort of old model of a visitor center.
Thank you. And I do like the idea of calling it the Civic Center. One thing, I think it's more inviting for our locals. think about all the graduations that happen there and all of the different community meetings that happen there. And we do use it for tourism as well. We've seen all these sporting events lately. Created a big parking problem, but we wanted that. We want problem, but we wanted all those people to come. And so calling it a civic center, I think it's more embracing to our citizens. So I think that's a really grand idea. On the elevated walkway, I see where you're coming from on that, and I think that's a really good idea as well. Those of you who have been to the High Line in New York, it was an old subway, above subway track, and it's up high, and they have really decorated it well with lots of landscaping, pathways, and things like that, and people really love it. They really love it. So maybe some thought could be not just a walkway, but something that's more interesting than that.
Yeah, I described it earlier as a public amenity, right? So it's similar to a park. And so I've been to the High Line a few times, and what you realize along the High Line is what I said earlier about unlocking the district, right? Everything along the High Line on the ground and on its level has grown and redeveloped. And the reason is the freedom it gives you. So actually the Gateway building, when we realized that, like, wow, what if you could park there at the end of the interstate and I don't have to go find a parking space? And you see, when I enter the district, I see where I'm headed. I see other people using it, and it's a public amenity on that level that people would immediately go to that. And to be frank, we need the parking. It's 900 spaces there that otherwise is not really accessible. So it creates immediate access upon arrival, which is what you want. You want people to get connected right away. And so we think there's probably not a better way to connect along parks, which is central to the entire district.
But it will need elevators.
Yeah, or you do them in the buildings.
It will need elevators.
Yep.
To be able to make it useful. See people with strollers and
Yep.
disabled, all kinds of stuff. So it definitely would need.
Yes, ma'am.
So can you talk about the Gateway building a little bit more because it's the Gateway, and so it should be iconic because that's one of the first things people will see coming out on the interstate and approaching the resort.
Yeah, so that was the problem we created for ourselves, right? Like, what a great place for parking. Get there, arrive, have this great sense of arrival, park the car, get up on the walkway and move through. Well, now I have a bunch of parking there, right? So we studied some other proposals that we were made aware of, and then we looked at the nature of MoCA and the sort of civic line that Park makes through there, and then thought about it could be commercial space for one, but it also could be event space that can be used as part of the civic campus that's out there. So that building that we're showing, if I can get to it, actually I should back up. There's 120,000 square feet in that building that could be put to use as part of the campus. I think calling it the Civic Center and thinking about sports going into the convention center and making it flexible in there, as soon as we started thinking that's what it sort of opened us up to this vision for this, which is there's a flexibility across all these spaces to be able to be put to use as the city needs now and as it does over time. So, I think it would be great to be able to go to that building, experience the rooftop on that building as a public amenity, be able to look back to the city and look down into the district. You'd be able to see the water, we think, from there at this height, and then connect on that High Line and move through. But
You're already calling it the High Line. I like that.
yeah, I mean, it's taken, but we were calling it the Parks Avenue Gateway because it's a rival, it's a gate to the city, and it unlocks all of these places for a visitor, and it does it right away. And you see it when you enter the ocean front.
Thank you. I'm sure there'll be more questions later.
Yeah. Okay, Josh, Michael, and then Cash, and then Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Dills, for the presentation. It's great kind of seeing it depicted, and they're really good concepts and kind of groupings of uses across the study area. Just one thing that kind of sticks out to me, and I know you've mentioned it a couple of different times, is that a lot of this is private property, and particularly along that Parks Avenue spine that you have there. I think we kind of need to see how and if some of that stuff, if it does or ever play out, and for that reason, I think we've got to kind of be location agnostic with a lot of these uses and groupings of uses around one another.
Sure.
And while I love the concept of connectivity and making things pedestrian friendly and getting it importantly up off the road. I mean, traffic's flying even though the speed limit says to slow down off the
tough.
freeway. So it makes it really difficult to obviously connect from MoCA to the convention center area because of that. And I know, like, a lot of the conversations we've had over the last several months have been, focused around, avoiding overpromising and under-delivering. And as much as I love that concept of a gateway walkway, I just wonder, number one, the feasibility of it, and then number two, it really is going to depend on what happens to the east of the convention center to make that make sense. I think. Perhaps, I mean, using this and the beautiful renderings, I think maybe we kind of try and determine what elements and what uses, in this set of plans, are within our control. And parking, action sports, and we've talked, about a hotel, for quite some time. I don't know if a hotel makes sense or not either, but I know part of what tripped up those efforts in some respects is the bridge, and I wouldn't want that to trip us up if it otherwise made sense. So I think that if we think strategically in terms of the public investment, and then that spurs the growth and development around it, I think that'll help kind of fill in some of these missing pieces. I've heard, and I know report after report has told us that that the convention center is underperforming in a sense, or there is a feeling that it is underperforming because there is no headquarters hotel associated with it. And we've heard that event planners don't like to, be scattered around the resort. They want to be in one spot and then walk in a covered area or a connected area to get to the hotel because it's easy logistics wise. Whether all that stuff is true and bears out, if we were to do an analysis, I'd be interested to see. But that's kind of where my feelings are.
Okay, Michael, Cash, and Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Dills, and there's definitely a lot to unpack here. You could drill down on any particular aspect of this and do a deep dive, and I won't do that to you today. But one aspect that I did want to kind of just focus on for the moment is and Vice Mayor Wilson kind of did this a little bit already, but on the Gateway building, I think that's I want to highlight that as, in my view, a really important element of this concept, and also really emphasize that in terms of the sense of arrival, in the city of Virginia Beach, particularly if you're a visitor, we have an underwhelming sense of arrival. And the visitor center, as Vice Mayor noted, is visitor centers in general, the industry, travel, tourism industry will affirm that people are not using them. People are using their phones, as you noted.
Yep.
And so not only do we have sort of an outdated use, but we have an underutilized asset there, and the general sense of arrival around that area where 264 ends and the sort of city roadways into the resort begins, it leaves a lot to be desired. And I think one of the first things we need to address is that space, is that site, and enhance our sense of arrival. And so I'm really glad that I'm glad that I was going to have you reference that slide, so I'm glad you went there too. We really do need to improve that sense of arrival, and I think we can do it with that building. And I agree with you about the use. I think it could be a cultural use. I think it could be an events-based use. And I think parking, whether it's there or in very near adjacent space, would complement all the activities that are around there. But in general, one of the first things I think we need to tackle is that sense of arrival. And there's sort of complementary aspects of that, including some of the other surrounding properties that depress our sense of arrival. But I think it's really important that we tackle that, because as the saying goes, you only have one chance to make a first impression.
Yep.
And that's the first impression that we have for many visitors. I also think Mount Trashmore is a first impression too, by the way.
Yeah.
That's another topic entirely, but it's a landmark that you pass as you enter into our city, that we can improve our sense of arrival there too. But I'll leave that for another day. But it's a perfect segue to mine. So I don't know if you have any comments on that, but
I mean,
do
I'll
you
say
have any
we
sense
spent
of
a lot of
timeline
time.
around that? In other words, where would you start
So
all this?
I think to Mr. Schulman's question about it, about when would you do that, right? Like, when would you invest in that? So if the market tells you the headquarters hotel makes sense on paper, right? I line that out as a private partner to make that happen. We think for sure it wants an elevated bridge over to the convention center, like it was planned to do. And we think the best use, and I'm kind of retracing steps about how we got to this point. The Gateway building, being able to park there and get out of the car and immediately get into the district, for us, when we realized we could do that, we kind of played this out as like, it happens there on the left-hand side, it happens at the hotel at the other end. You don't need any more than that. You just need to connect the dots. So, and then the next question is like, well, what is it? How does it enhance that sense of arrival? We thought the best way it did is make it lush, make it outdoor, make it lush, make it seem as if it's a park moving overhead full of people, because 900 parking spaces are in there and they're all headed into the district, right? Or to their hotel or to the wrestling match. And for us, and we put the logo on there, we're not, I don't know if it would be that, but it's kind of the pocket square, right? On arrival, right? Tuck it in, I arrive. I feel like this has been taken care of here, and I see how active it is, and I want to be a part of that. That's essentially our thinking. And that's step by step how you would get there. Even, I think, how you invest in it. I think the hotel tells you to do this, actually.
Interesting, because we have some dissent about the hotel, which I think is a nice segue into my next question or point.
I will say, I think parking there, if we can make that work, and I do think we can, is a huge bonus to all of Central Beach down there. And as soon as you say yes, that's a great idea, is everyone going to cross 21st Street or 22nd Street to do that? Right. That's another line of thinking on it that leads us to this.
Yeah.
We weren't, it wasn't, the High Line is long and a gigantic investment, and it's Manhattan. This is not a long a long ways. It's connecting 2 points that really connects the district together. It gets people to those destinations and out of their car faster.
So your concept that you presented today, and it's really well done and really interesting, it's a departure from some of the proposals that we've seen from the private sector. And having no particular position on one proposal or another proposal or different things. And I mean, no, I mean, I'm just gonna just say it, and just how is this supported in any way by actual market demand? In other words, I mean, the unsolicited proposals that we received, at least we know there's private sector capital behind the concepts that were presented. What you have here is a concept based on community engagement in a study, because I've seen this before. Like, this is beautiful. This is amazing. It looks lush, and it looks expensive. And some of the plans that I've seen, they have like living rooftops and greenery on the buildings. And I know from years of sitting at this table that these things get value engineered out as you actually get there. So I think the public, we need to be straight with the public about, is this this is obviously an aspirational concept in some ways, but is it in any way supported by market demand or private capital? Or is it kind of a wish list based on the community engagement that you did?
No, we met with probably everyone who's put a proposal in within the last 5 to 8 years. Right, Chris? You would agree with that? And what I meant earlier about this also shows a pattern of development, especially in the privately owned properties, that could actually be realized. I mean, those private entities are showing things that would fit with this. To be honest, this would enhance it, especially in the mixed use area there and around this gateway side. The rest of it is really, if you look at it, we're creating a central park, and it's about half the size of the one that we showed originally, right? It's much smaller, which we actually think is better. It's more dense. And then it's parking destinations, primarily in sports, and adding residential and associated retail. And those are all things, as it builds, you have to have out there. It won't be successful without the parking, and people need to live there, and we need housing. So I
mean, I'm not disagreeing with any of that.
I think
Curious if
this takes into account all those proposals. We've looked at every single one, and since last November, I met with every one of those groups, and they walked me through how it pencils out, essentially. And the privately held areas, those are much more complicated, right? There's not single owners anywhere. So it's hard to put all those together. If you look in our plan, let me try to get back there. If you look in our plan, we're showing there's already property that's in there that is being developed. It's in site plan approval now that we took into account, but it would probably change some of those proposals that you've seen. But we're trying to show a pattern of development through that space that allows those plans to take hold. This is from massing and stories, right? We looked at their square footages, their housing units. We dug in on it. This actually reflects some of that. But I would say what it does is it leaves the door open to a pattern of development so that it can happen through a mixed-use zone that's very much like the ones that have been considered over time. Right? We studied those in great depth, actually.
Okay, Michael. Cash and then Jennifer.
I want to thank you for your presentation. Anything that causes Virginia Beach to look more attractive when it comes to residents, and especially where I live at, right, District 7, which will attract us to come down there. I'm all in for that. Just a point of clarity. On page 9, Were you asking city council to kind of choose between the two plans, or you were just presenting?
I know those were the concepts we did before, and we actually asked people not to choose.
Okay,
They were previous concepts, and really they were there to test ideas, right? So they're different, and then people would give us comments on various aspects of those. What do you like about this one? What do you don't not like over here? So that we could develop this hybrid preferred plan that came out of that.
okay. I like the hybrid. I like it.
I'm glad.
So thank you for your work.
I appreciate that. We're, hybriding this many moving parts takes a lot of information.
Okay, Jennifer, and then Amelia.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. And I agree, this is very beautiful. It's very lovely. And actually have two questions now based on what Councilmember Berlucci said. So my first initial question was, have we discussed the funding mechanism for this? What does that structure look like? What are the options? And looking at this, it seems like you've synthesized a lot of existing plans. So is it now the, I guess, direction of the body that should somebody bring an unsolicited proposal, we use this framework to say if it's a private business and they're bringing private dollars that wouldn't require public investment, we can say, hey, here's where you fit into this broader cohesive idea. And what are we paying for in terms of public dollars? What would an investment in something like this look like?
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Councilmember Rouse, this is probably best started by me, and then maybe if Clay has anything else to add to it, he can add to it. But how you're gonna pay for this really depends. I think probably what I was thinking was the next steps is that we've received several proposals on areas in this general proximity. Probably the staff's next step would be to brief city council on those, bring those back to your attention, and then garner a sense of is there anything that you all want to move forward with, and then in general probably see if council wants to put forward an RFP or to do nothing at this time. Right? I wouldn't necessarily suggest that we be location specific at this time, because since what we've gotten is ideas and unsolicited proposals on a multiple of different areas. But if there's certain elements that the council is interested in exploring, for example, parking, right, that could be one of the things that we can indicate to the market that we're willing to contribute. How you pay for it really depends on what comes forward, right? Some of it may be general funds, some of it may be, depending on what the proposers bring forward, it may generate tax revenue that may provide but-for financing that council may think of as a path to pay for this, for some of these things. It could be that council is interested in maybe exploring project-specific tax increment financing tools, but really a lot of it depends on what council is willing to authorize us to move forward with, and then seeing if the market sends anything of interest to us, and then when they let us know what they need from the city in terms of support for their project, then for council to determine if that's a price tag too high or a price tag that's affordable for the city to move forward with.
Okay, and then Amelia, and then we're gonna try to wrap up. Okay.
Want to thank you again for the presentation. There were two things that caught my eye that you mentioned, because you continue to say sense of arrival just for Central Beach or all the way to the resort. How are you connecting this part to the next? Because you mentioned about connectivity, communities, destination, and as a district. And then at the very beginning, if you look where you have page 4, you mentioned about local community and unique identity, the local character of that specific area. Are you relating to it historically?
Yeah, I think so. To answer your first question, for sure, it's a sense of arrival and a gateway to the oceanfront and resort. Central Beach is there to do that. That's what we think. Our whole connection of Parks Avenue and 19th Street is to bring all of those communities together and be able to connect those. The Parks Avenue connection to the north, those communities, and even on the west side to Bird Neck and to Norfolk Avenue and the VB Trail and SeaTac and Old Beach, all from, all corners in there. Central Beach, why it's called Central Beach, it presents the opportunity to do that. And I'll say historically, we're being protective of those neighborhoods, that you're scaling down to them and you're offering them something. You're offering them connection first, and then you're scaling down to those. But I think when you talk about culture or something that's authentic here, is that really all of those things are informing these decisions in Central Beach, right? That's the live, work, play, experience, host, the whole list. All those things happen there, and we don't want to do away with that. We want to enhance that.
Right, so you feel at least with the culture, with the CTAC, with all of those, that you have that connection
Yes.
with them.
Yep.
Okay, and the other part about embrace healthy competition, because along that area you have right by I'm old school, I like the convention center. But right near them, you have like the DoubleTree, you have the Ambassador, you have those hotels that have long been there, and some of the people are right out here. I wonder, when you say healthy competition, have you all talked?
Yeah, we've seen those proposals. We heard, feedback on those. Their healthy competition for us means that the market is informing these decisions, so that if someone can pencil it out, and it's unsolicited, that there can be competition for that, and that the city obviously doesn't do anything that takes away competition, right? That's even the headquarters hotel. There's a little bit of city land there, but it's a majority of private property. So if the city invests, creates demand, the market follows. The public realm leads the way.
Finally, the gateway, the overpass. I'm also looking at elevators somehow for
sure.
seniors, disabled.
Yep, for sure.
If we go this route. All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. It was this is aspirational, and it's obviously a decade or decades in the making, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step, and that's going to be parking.
Yeah.
And, but, once again, I kind of like the idea about maybe the ice in one of the places there. That way you get somebody in the convention center pretty much every day. Yeah. But maybe we won't need a hotel because, we'll get to smaller conventions that are more practical. But otherwise, this is a great idea. It's going to make the oceanfront year-round. It's going to help us financially in the future. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, next.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, at your request, we're going to have staff from the City Attorney's Office and supported by our Department of Communications give City Council a briefing regarding a possible 10-1 election referendum.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I know you and probably a good chunk of the public are tired of seeing me on this topic at this point, but it remains a dynamic situation. And so we're happy to provide this briefing to the City Council on kind of how we got to this point through various legal cases and legislative actions, and then what a possible referendum for a charter change would look like. Starting with where we started, before 2022, your elections were governed by charter, or were a 7-3-1 system that had 7 residence districts, 3 at-large seats or districts, and 1 mayor. The district boundaries had to be adjusted by per state law every 10 years after each decennial census, and your school board is elected per the charter, similar to the city council. That all was impacted by the filing of the Holloway case in 2017, It was augmented and changed in 2018 with the addition of Campaign Legal Center and Ms. Georgia Allen as a second plaintiff. At that time, the case was developed through discovery and went to trial in 2020 over 6 days. The court, however, did not rule until March of 2021, and that timeline ends up being important. The trial court at the time initially ruled that charter system violates Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act because it dilutes minority voting strength, and he enjoined further use. That was again in March 2021. The trial court later issued a remedial order in December 2021 imposing a special master designed 10-1 system with 3 minority opportunity districts. Completing the Holloway circle, and there's some other things that happened that I'm going to refer back to in time, but the U.S. Court of Appeals vacated ultimately the trial court orders as being moot because the General Assembly had passed in 2021 House Bill 2198, which by operation of state general law changed your residence districts to 7 ward or single member districts. And so the system that was litigated in October of 2020 no longer existed prior to the court ruling in March of 2021. That Court of Appeals ruling, however, did not come down until July of 2022, late July, in fact. At that time, you were well into your election season under the 10-1 system that the federal district court had imposed, and there was no possibility of changing it that late in the process, with candidates having already qualified and early voting starting within a month or so, to a month or two after the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled. Again, there were a couple of important legislative changes that occurred in 2021. One was this House Bill 2198 that changed the charter residence districts to single member districts. And that was, again, the basis of the Court of Appeals' ruling. Also, the Virginia Voting Rights Act was adopted, which has many implications for your election system. An important one being there's absolutely a heightened scrutiny standard of when or if at-large districts may be used at all. And we'll circle back to that in a minute. But the election in 2022 was held under the 10-1 system because that's what the court had previously ordered. The General Assembly's actions had many effects. Obviously, and none of these were the result of the Holloway case. First of all, your 7 residence districts became single-member ward districts. So citizens at that point, moving forward, would not be electing all 11 members of council. They'd be electing their district rep, 3 at large, and 1 mayor. So I guess 5 instead of 11. But then importantly, your remaining at large districts in your charter are subject to a private citizen challenge, even if you were pre-cleared by the Virginia Attorney General to use a system such as the revised or modified charter system. Importantly, the Virginia Voting Rights Act, which I'll refer sometimes to as VAVRA, made a broad definition of vote dilution and basically said influence districts are enough to show vote dilution, whereas the Federal Voting Rights Act is narrower. The Jingles 1 test, which is compactness, also is not found in the Virginia Voting Rights Act, although it's part of federal case law and has an important role in what districts you can and can't use and what other configurations they may be. The VAVRA provisions also prohibit retrogression, meaning in a broad sense that if you hold an election under a system that, for example, in 2022 has 3 minority opportunity districts, then there has to be a certification either by the Attorney General or through your process that they are not the new system you adopt after 2022, for example, it does not retrogress or put minorities in a lesser standard than where they were under the prior election standard. It allows for recovery of plaintiff's attorney's fees for a citizen action, and a claim is allowed, as I mentioned before, even if the Attorney General has pre-cleared your districts, and that suit can, at least as written, be against the locality, notwithstanding, the state's role in all of this. So as we said, the 2022 election was held using the 10-1 system. The 2024 election, though, was undecided as we turned the page into 2023. And so there was a public process that council embarked upon to determine how to proceed at that time. There was no court order, obviously, going into 2024, so the city had to do its redistricting process per state law in 2023. The city council hired UVA's Weldon Cooper Center to do a public input process, to have a statistically validated survey, and provide recommendations to the city council, both as to public opinions and as to legality of various system approaches. The survey showed a couple of different things. Importantly, at the time, it said that 81% of the public surveyed in a statistically validated survey supported the 10-1 system. However, it also showed that 63% of the public had support for a referendum, which something as you may be considering now. The decennial redistricting ordinance ultimately adopted 10-1 for 2024. That was in August of 2023. You'll recall that was a 10-1 vote at the time. Subsequently, the council voted to pursue a charter and state law changes in Richmond to conform the charter to the decennial redistricting ordinance, which per Virginia statute is supposed to take legal precedence over the charter after its adoption. The election in 2024, therefore, occurred under the 10-1 system, as you all well know. However, the legislative changes in Richmond in 2025 in January drew a lawsuit challenging the city's adoption of the 10-1 system through the decennial redistricting measure. That's the Branch case that I know you're familiar with. Branch alleges that the city council could not on its own adopt the 10-1 system through the decennial redistricting measure, notwithstanding various provisions of state law that appear to allow that. There was a hearing in May of last year on the city's preliminary motions to dismiss on various grounds. The court ruled in August 2024, and this was Judge Poston, retired judge out of Norfolk at the time, that the 2022 election results were upheld. The plaintiff had requested an injunction to prevent the 10-1 system from being used in 2024. The court denied the injunction, and then the court directed the parties to schedule a trial, presumably for some time in 2025, over the application of the Virginia Voting Rights Act to the city's ability to adopt the 10-1 system and or to be prevented from using the 7-3-1 system by virtue of various state law requirements under VAVRA. The plaintiffs recently hired additional DC counsel, and they filed a motion for summary judgment, which is pending, but has not yet been scheduled for argument. As I said a moment ago, obviously your 2024 election also occurred under 10-1. The Branch case notwithstanding, but it is still pending, so it's still part of your legal reality. And the Qualwich case that was also filed seeking to find that all of your seats other than the mayor's were vacant, as well as all the school board seats, we obtained dismissal of that case on Friday. So that case is gone. Future elections. So the decennial redistricting ordinance was adopted in 2023, and that is the one-off ordinance you get to adopt every 10 years for a redistricting. The Branch legal challenge does continue. The City Council, one exception to the City Council's ability to only adopt one redistricting per 10 years is a court order that that the Branch plaintiffs, I guess, are seeking. The charter, as we've discussed, says one thing, which is that you have 7 single-member districts, 3 at-large districts, and 1 mayor. You would still need to, if you were following that system and you had that court order allowing you to use it or to district again, you would have to change the boundaries of your old 7 districts to use the 2020 census data. And then just for purposes of the dynamic legal environment we find ourselves in, the Holloway plaintiffs have threatened immediate federal court action if the city council takes steps toward using the modified charter system in future elections. So you have legal threats and legal jeopardy on both sides of this argument. The council has frequently in the past discussed the possibility of having a charter change referendum where people could ask the General Assembly directly for a charter change to a 10-1 system, if that is their will, as suggested at least by the public survey a year ago. A referendum is also, if it comes out in favor of 10-1, it might perhaps change some minds in Richmond where you are not able to get your charter change request enacted into law or a general law change due to resistance from some General Assembly members and from the governor. So no election referendum has been held since 2017 when these fights started. And in fact, you've not had an election system referendum since 1996. So what would a charter change referendum look like? You would be asking the General Assembly a question, or asking your public the question to tell the General Assembly a simple yes or no question. Should the charter be amended in this way? Must be briefly stated using plain English. If the question passes, the proposed charter amendment automatically must be delivered to members of the Virginia Beach General Assembly delegation for introduction at the next session. Referendum question would be submitted to and approved by the Circuit Court no later than August 15th to appear on the November 4th ballot, which I imagine would be your intent. It's certainly the most cost-efficient way of having a referendum at this point. And importantly, city staff cannot advocate for or against a referendum question. We can educate the public, and we may disseminate a neutral 500-word explanation written by the city attorney, but it would be up to members of the community and to council members and others to advocate for or against the referendum. It would not be for city staff or city attorneys to do. The city council may well, depending, no matter what the outcome of the referendum is, may not be able to implement the public's preferred method given the various pending and threatened court cases. So this is the question that has been suggested that would be neutrally worded and pose the question and explain the question to the public. Should the method of city council elections set forth in the Virginia Beach City Charter be changed from a modified 731 system to a 10-1 system? We have to use the word modified because of House Bill 2198. What is the pure text of the charter is not what exists today in state law by itself. A yes vote means that you support the 10-1 system, which was used in the 2022 and 2024 council elections. In the 10-1 system, the city is divided into 10 districts, and the voters of each district elect a single council member with the mayor elected at large, parenthetical citywide. A no vote means you support the 731 system described in the current city charter as modified by a general law change that occurred in 2021. In the modified 731 system, the city is divided into 7 districts, and the voters of each district elect a single council member with 3 other council members and the mayor elected at large. Again, that is also citywide for those 4 seats. Explanation of referendum question. 2 important points here for the public especially. The referendum asks whether the public wishes to request the General Assembly to amend the city charter to reflect the 10-1 system used in the 2022 and 24 elections, which would be a yes vote, or to retain the 731 election system stated in the charter as amended by general law in 2021, that would be a no vote. The purpose of this referendum is to address a conflict between the charter and the city's redistricting ordinance. Yes vote would resubmit the 10-1 charter amendment to the General Assembly, and no vote would indicate a desire to use the modified 731 system in future elections. So the council has asked for a plan and a budget for a public education campaign, again, not an advocacy campaign, and Tiffany is here to walk you through the details of what that would look like, and I'll stand aside while she does that.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Tiffany Russell. I am the Communications Director for the City of Virginia Beach, and I thought I would put together some thought starters, some initial factors at play here with a potential referendum for your consideration and discussion. So starting with some simple situational awareness that Deputy City Attorney Boynton referenced, we do have 63% of respondents to that survey in June of 2023 advocating for a referendum. So we know there is some public support for this, and that information is available to the public. That entire survey is available for the public to see at this time. In terms of the number of voters or the audience, because any kind of public education would be, this would be a voter education campaign so that they have confidence going into the polls on how to answer the question, because we've done our job educating them. We have approximately 350,000 voters in the city, so no easy task for a city of our size. And for situational awareness, there was 66% voter turnout in November of 2024. That gives you an idea of the number of individuals that we would want to reach and educate and disseminate this information to. Doing public education campaigns for the election system is not new to us. We have done two. And from a budget standpoint, I wanted to bring up the cost in order to ensure accurate reach and frequency of the message to our community so that they have the information and confidence going into the polls or providing feedback on the subject. And for the election system input, which we did contract out with the University of Virginia, that was close to $385,000 that was spent. And when we did do the redistricting ordinance, so our residents understood the 10-1 system going into the polls, it was approximately $250,000. Another factor to consider when thinking about communication campaigns, particularly for voters, is that we're seeing more and more early voter turnout. So that would impact our timeline of communication. In previous education campaigns, we've done a big push in the spring. We've taken the summer off because our residents tend to be less engaged with local government during our seasonal fun summertime, but then we see this a much more engagement leading into August, September timeframe. So just something to think about in terms of something that's on the ballot for November is really on the ballot for September. And then another factor that we consider when putting together strategic communication plans is we're looking at data to drive the decisions and recommendations to you for how to reach our residents. And in 2022, which was the last time the most current resident survey, we did ask our community for their preferred communication sources from the city, and I've listed them here. They are turning to local TV, so we have really good relationships with our media partners. They are turning to the city website, virginiabeach.gov. We've worked really hard to make that website compliant and easy to find information quickly for our community. Social media, obviously, is a huge factor, particularly in 2022. Facebook was the channel that they wanted. We have seen a huge lift in Instagram and some other channels. Again, this is 2022 data, but I still think it's relevant. And particularly number 4, direct mail. Across all 10 districts, all residents asked for direct mail to receive information from the city, which does come with a price tag, but we know that it's, again, when looking at how they want to hear from us. Number 1, with local TV, we can work with our partners to get stories out, make sure they're accurate for free, or we could do paid advertising. Obviously, we have our website, social media channels. These are owned media channels, but they aren't inclusive. We're reaching people who are already engaging with us. So when thinking about how to reach other audiences, I'm also thinking about how do we reach the unengaged community? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that here. Again, these are some initial thought starters. I wanted to show you, council, particularly our new council members, what resources we have available that are free or almost free, and then some recommendations. The items in red I've highlighted here because those are the top 4 preferred channels, but it's broken out into owned media. Those are channels that I own or the city owns that we have the ability to reach residents with. Earned media, that's our relationship again with our media partners. Shared media is where we're relying on whether that's council or organizations, influencers in the community to help get the word out. Huge focus here on neighborhood associations. So I've got some ideas for making sure these materials can be distributed through civic leagues and other groups, whether that's faith-based organizations, the business community. And of course, from a paid media standpoint, at minimum, I have here direct mail. We did that with the University of Virginia Community Engagement Initiative, and it was really well received. At first, when I was putting together this presentation for you, I estimated about $150,000 for direct mail. The quotes that I got just this morning range from $181,000 to $218,000 for every registered voter to receive a piece of information from us in the mail that would have the question at least, and we can also translate that into Spanish and Tagalog. So just going through own media, again, we got the website, our social media. We have a lot of subscribers to city emails, whether that's previous public input participants, those who are registered to get our Friday email, and then those who have participated in community meetings and have asked for additional opportunities. Those databases are available to us. We also want to make sure our employees are taken into consideration. We need to make sure they're knowledgeable. 7,500 employees who can go out and also do their best to educate and disseminate the materials in their neighborhoods at those backyard barbecues. We want to make sure they're informed and they understand this opportunity should a referendum question move forward. We have a cable channel, which research does show that while a lot of users have moved to streaming services, our cable channel is used by a segment of our community. From an equity standpoint, that's really important that we have information available on those Cox Cable and Verizon cable channels. And then we have partnerships with our other city departments too. More niche audiences, but whether it's a library or a rec center, they can help disseminate information and drive people back to a website, or we can leave printed materials behind at these venues as well. Moving to shared media, we have a dedicated team. This was a city council initiative to increase community engagement. Our public engagement team, led by Nancy Bloom, would be able to attend community events all throughout the summer into the fall to distribute and disseminate this material and educate the public. We can put together a digital toolkit for civic leagues and neighborhood associations so that they can have information readily available to residents through newsletters or emails. We have about 192 contacts for neighborhood leaders that we actively communicate with. And we also anticipate that there would be a lot of public forums. We know we can host public forums. Obviously, we do that with public hearings, open comment, inviting residents to come and speak. The city can also offer that digitally during this time leading up to November. But we imagine that the community too, whether that's churches or neighborhood associations, would want to host their own public forums, and the communications office can support those by providing materials. But again, we can't advocate, lobby. There are pros and cons for all the systems, and so that would, the public forums are a great place for the community to get together and talk about that, really a form of public expression. And so we would provide tools, but that would be the extent to which we could participate in those. We think our small business community in particular could get involved. We'll provide them some materials, whether that's a shared QR code or for flyers in their windows or just material to distribute. And there's also an opportunity for, at a small fee, we can include messaging in the service bill that goes out to residents, their water bill, their combined services bill. So. Again, that's a look at free, almost free, just some ideas of things that we can do. But best practice is to, for any education campaign, you can't just reach an individual once with a message. It's why you get so many repeat ads, probably in your social media feed. Most private companies know this. At minimum 3 times, someone wants to hear a message, you want them to respond and engage and become informed, look for more information. We would have that 500-word explanation to help educate voters on the question that's going to be on the ballot. And so what I've put here, in addition to the 500-word explanation, is that we could do some things like a general print ad that's about $2,000. Just adding the question to the ballot's only $300. So that's the true cost of moving to referendum. But these are just some things in addition to that. We've run TV ads in the past. TV advertising is very expensive, but we're looking at some previous campaigns where council has provided me input that you wanted to see paid advertising on TV and radio. Radio can really reach a niche audience to make sure, again, we're reaching our entire community. And then digital advertising makes a lot of sense with how many people are online getting information. So these are just some examples of things we can do. And a reminder again, I cannot advocate for or against the question. So making sure we have a really succinct FAQ section. You have that, I have that, our community has that. They understand what I can and can't do. But we will do our best to answer any questions that come through, as they're factual and neutral. And those are additional materials we're prepared to answer even today as this presentation is public. All right, I'll turn it back over to Chris for next steps.
Thank you, Tiffany. So if the council preferred to move forward on a referendum question, it would ask our city attorney to draft a resolution and put it on a future city council agenda for a vote. A timeline could be you would have public comment in 2 weeks on April 15th, and then you'd have the council vote on the referendum adoption, meaning whether you're going to have a referendum or not on May 6th. Obviously, that's subject to council discretion, and that's just a proposed timeline if council wants to go in this direction. With that, Tiffany and I would be happy to answer any questions the council has.
Okay, if I can start it off. You know, voting is a right, and it's a big deal to everybody in this city and in this country. And one of the problems I've had in the way that the 10-1 came about, you know, with the General Assembly, there was no conversation with us about it. It just happened, and we had to live with it. And that bothers me. And once again, we had talked previously over time about having a referendum, but one of the times we did that was at the height of COVID. It was impractical at that time. And then after that, the 10-1, you know, came upon us. And I will state for the record yet again, over 20 years, I have always been an advocate for the 7-district system with the at-large and with the potential for, you know, supermajorities in there. That to me is a compromise. And, you know, once again, just being out and about and people having the experience of 2 elections under the system, some people like it and some people don't. And the thing is that, you know, I think we owe it to the public. But once again, you know, it's another part. It's not only the question itself on the ballot, it's the education about what is going on. So, but once again, I think, you know, I personally feel the obligation to go to the public and say, what do you think? Do you like it or don't you? And then, you know, go from there. Hey, anybody? You know, Jennifer?
Questions. And a lot of this, it's questions either that I've heard from the public or we at the body have gotten a number of these briefings. So a lot of this we hear and we can kind of tune out because it's like, okay, but the public, so I just want to clarify some things. So we've been at this since, in recent memory, 2017 with the Holloway case. But I want to read an excerpt from the Weldon Cooper study. It's from the introduction, and this is quoted. It says, for multiple decades, coalitions of racial minorities have lobbied for Virginia Beach to adopt single-member districts, claiming that at-large system worked to dilute minority voting power. These efforts culminated in the Holloway versus City of Virginia Beach, in which a federal court held that Virginia Beach's system violated the Voting Rights Act. And so I want to kind of bring that context in, that this isn't just 2017, but for decades prior, there have been attempts and efforts from racial coalitions to bring this issue to the body. And because the body in that time did not bring a referendum forward, there have been these other mechanisms that have moved the body towards that direction for more representation and to not violate the Voting Rights Act. Virginia Code, this is an email we got from Georgia Allen, Virginia Code 24.2-311, item B, ordinances adopted by local governing bodies to accomplish the decennial redistricting of districts for county, city, and town governing bodies required by Article 7, Section 5 of the Constitution of Virginia shall take effect immediately. And as you mentioned in your presentation, in 2023, this body adopted the 10-1 election system as part of our decennial redistricting. So can you explain what decennial redistricting is and what happened when the city council adopted this measure in 2023?
Certainly, I can defer to Mark if he prefers. Okay, so decennial redistricting is at its purest or at its simplest, where you have multiple districts in a locality and the population has changed over 10 years, and you're trying to get the population of the districts similar in population for one person, one vote purposes. So that is required by state law, but under various other provisions of state law, it is also allowed that you can, under certain circumstances as a locality, increase or decrease the number of districts or seats as you deem appropriate. And that's what you did in August of 2023 as a body by both basically changing to 10 districts from 7 districts. You're not allowed to exceed 11 seats total by Virginia law. And so you functionally converted the at-large districts or at-large seats to 3 districts and then put population into those 10 districts.
So we did that in 2023. And is it usual practice to change course once this redistricting has been adopted?
I can't speak to mutual practice. I can tell you that under state law, a locality is allowed to do it once every 10 years, but for a few exceptions that are statutorily provided, one of which is following a court order.
So it's not really a question, but it's something I've thought about since some of our briefings that we've been getting mostly in closed session, that we decided this course in 2023, and this decennial redistricting, that decision should last 10 years. But we are going back on it because of a lawsuit.
I can't speak to why we are or aren't going back to it. There are lawsuits out there.
So this, for me, begs the question about precedent, that if the city council decides on an action and then people put forward a lawsuit, does that then negate our authority to move forward in certain directions as we have decided? So we've made a decision to do this, and now we're reversing course.
Well, the lawsuit that has been filed challenges the council's decision to go to a 10-district system as being inconsistent with the charter and beyond the authority of the council to affect that change. And so if the court agrees, then the court will order the city to go back to a 7-3-1 system, and you'll have to do a new redistricting ordinance by order of the court. Then, of course, the Holloway plaintiffs will likely come back and challenge that system again. And so I think where you are is the council, if the council elects to pursue a referendum, the council is essentially saying, which system do you want the city to defend? Because we've been defending an election system or systems now constantly for the last 25 minus 17 is 8 years.
Okay, so something else that's been brought up a number of times as it relates to this issue is that this change happened to us. So from the federal court decision to HB 2198, which was the General Assembly changed about the single member districts and residency. Can you explain what moot means? And did HB 2198 achieve the aim of the Holloway lawsuit, which is to support a system, a single member district that does not dilute minority voting power?
So moot in this context was that the election system that was challenged in the Holloway case and that resulted in a 6-day trial in October of 2020 was the 10-1 system pre-House Bill 2198, where you had all 11 members elected at large. Because the General Assembly under House Bill 2198 changed that system prior to the court's ruling, the system that was challenged no longer existed under state law. And accordingly, the rulings of the U.S. District Court were moot because that system didn't exist anymore. It also did say, though, that the plaintiffs, the case was actually remanded back to the district court rather than dismissed, and the plaintiffs were invited to file amended claims if this new system that the General Assembly had imposed in 2021 by virtue of House Bill 2198 was believed to also violate the Voting Rights Act and the estimation of the Holloway plaintiffs. That action was pending for a while. It was dismissed voluntarily by the Holloway plaintiffs after the council's actions in fall of 2023.
So that case was, the Holloway case was dismissed voluntarily after the council adopted the decennial redistricting measure.
Correct.
Okay. Who writes the referendum questions?
Well, we propose a neutral question to you as your attorneys, and then you decide to adopt it or not, or to phrase it that way. And in passing a resolution that would then go to the Circuit Court of Virginia Beach. Circuit Court of Virginia Beach would review it for things like neutrality and brevity and that type of thing. And if it approved the question as written by City Council after input from the city attorney, then that would be the question that appeared on the ballot.
The referendum, is this a binding referendum? Binding referendum, and can you explain what that means?
Well, it's binding in the sense that if it passes, meaning if a majority of the public prefers the 10-1 system, the charter change request has to go to the General Assembly. It does not guarantee any General Assembly action.
So this referendum, the outcome would trigger a response where this will go to General Assembly. The General Assembly will then decide, as it has been deciding, to approve or not. Okay. Is there a chance that either result can't be implemented?
Absolutely. We have, obviously warring factions on both sides of the legal/political issue, and it could well be that a court overturns the continued use of the 10-1 system in state court, or the reimposition of a 7-3-1 system by a state court judge, which could be challenged and overruled in federal court.
So to reiterate, we're going to ask for a referendum question, and the public will weigh in, and their desire may or may not be legally possible.
Ultimately implemented, correct.
Okay. So a couple more comments, and then those are my questions for now. These are questions I brought in, so I'm just trying to get my mind around also what you've presented here. I just want to give some more context from the Weldon Cooper study. This will be brief. Some Virginia Beach historical background. I'm reading directly from the document. It says, from its merger with Princess Anne County in 1963 to 2021, Virginia Beach used a relatively novel electoral system. All 11 city council members were elected at large, but 7 members needed to live in specific residential districts. This system was created as a political compromise to enhance the representation of the rural former county without violating laws guaranteeing equal size of electoral districts. During the nearly 60-year period, only 6 people of color were elected to Virginia Beach City Council. In 2021, the combined minority population in Virginia Beach reached 33% after steady growth over decades. For multiple decades, coalitions of racial minorities have lobbied for Virginia Beach to adopt single-member districts, claiming the at-large system worked to dilute minority voting power. These efforts culminated in Holloway versus City of Virginia Beach, in which a federal court held that Virginia Beach's system violated the Voting Rights Act. Virginia Beach was ordered by the court to adopt a new 10-1 single-member district system, which was implemented in early 2022 and first utilized in the 2022 local election. However, between the time the lawsuit began and the verdict was issued, Virginia outlawed the use of local election systems in which candidates have district residency requirements but are elected in an at-large system. As a result of the new law, which effectively outlawed the challenge election system in Virginia Beach, the Fourth Circuit found that the legal case was moot and remanded the case back to the district court for further proceedings in the event that Virginia Beach opted to change its system in a way that invited legal challenge. In November 2022, under the 10-1 single-member district system, voters elected 3 new Black council members, making for the most racially diverse city council in Virginia Beach's history. This one election cycle under the 10-1 system elected half as many Black council members to serve Virginia Beach as have been elected in the previous 60 years combined. So to close these comments, as we're having a conversation about the referendum, we're preparing to ask a referendum question that we may or may not be able to do what the public is asking us to do. We are currently dealing with 2 active legal cases that are still yet to be determined as we're playing out in the court. The direction that we've gone in with the decennial redistricting was in response to the Holloway claim, which is that the city of Virginia Beach violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And as it turns out, under the new system, we elected more African Americans in that one voting cycle than in the 60-year history combined. And the optics of this is that we've done that. We did the Weldon Cooper survey, which I've consistently been in my position. So I did not support this survey because I had questions about the intention because of something as weighty as representation in government. So we did the Weldon Cooper survey, and I'll admit I was surprised at the outcome. I was like, I don't know what we're gonna get, and I was surprised at the outcome. And so then we did that. I think maybe, well, I won't assign motivation. All I'll say is the optics of this are that we've done all of this, and what are we asking for? What are we returning to by asking to go back to a 731 system? With all of this work, and this isn't just the Holloway case, this is saying for decades, there's been an effort for racial representation and a claim that there's been a dilution of minority vote. We have seen progress since the 10-1 single member districts, whether 10-1, whatever, single member districts was the ask here. And so a return to at large is a return to what we came from. And we're also asking, I understand that 63% of the public wants a referendum question. I also want the public to be aware that we may not be able to do what you want us to do because these issues are still in the courts. So I have a question about what we're doing here today.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that.
Sure.
That question, I totally respect where you're coming from. But once again, it shows how divided, the council was for a number of years over this. It was a source of confrontation. And let me just say that, Chris, this is not going back to the old way, is it? Isn't it, we're going to have 7 single districts?
It would be the modified 731 system, which we've never had an election under. It would have 3 at-large seats in it. And again, there are questions regarding the impact of especially the Virginia Voting Rights Act on those 3 districts being at large as opposed to single member districts, as has been stated by those folks who support 10-1.
But there would be 7 single member districts.
That's correct.
Okay, so once again, like I said, I've been an advocate for that because once again, it was leveling the playing field and helping out. And I've been that way for 20 years. And the other thing is too, I think the reason why are we here because once again, getting a charter change is a challenge in Richmond, and there has been deadlock. And so once again, it's a divided, folks in Virginia Beach, and we have some differing opinions in, Richmond. But the other thing is too, why we're here. Now that we now have 2 election cycles of people with the 10-1. And the point is, people can change their minds over the time, whether they like it or not. They can go either way, back and forth. And once again, Mark, don't we have now data from 2 elections that we can, more accurately do the minority majority districts?
Well, we certainly have additional election data that can be considered by demographers and map drawers in an effort to ensure that we continue to have sufficient minority opportunity election districts. There is a question, it's like any other question that involves expert conclusions. There will be disagreement about whether those 3 districts out of 7 are as effective as 3 districts out of 10. And I don't know how that disagreement will play out, but there is the apparent ability potentially to create 3 minority opportunity districts under the 7-3-1 system.
And that's something we really didn't have before. Yeah, I remember in 2010, I actually volunteered the Centerville district where I was, to be a minority majority district. But once again, I think, once again, I kind of approach this as a compromise but once again, we're asking the public to think about it. And, the thing is, and I'm just going to say this, back in 2018, I was elected mayor. My replacement was a minority, and my opponents, I think the guy, got elected. And then we also appointed Delcino Miles. So under the old system, we did have. But once again, times have changed, and I think our city has evolved and everything. And the thing is, why not at least take the temperature of the public? Yes. Please.
Question of money. So we're going to, thank you, Ms. Russell, for laying out the cost for communication. In terms of the referendum, the cost for the question is $300, but the cost for the result is what I'm interested in. So if, let's say, the public wants a 7-3-1, and we are not able to move forward with the 10-1, what happens with the Holloway case?
Well, we would continue. Let me start with where we are now. We are continuing to defend the 10-1 system because the City Council adopted it in August of 2023. If the referendum prefers 7-3-1, then Council will provide us direction at that time as to how to proceed. If it is to follow the apparent public will by 7-3-1, then you are in a world where the Holloway plaintiffs certainly are coming back. They are seeking all of the accrued attorney's fees that they claim from the prior litigation matter, plus new attorney's fees. And of course, whether it be defending the Branch case or the Holloway case, or God forbid, both of them at the same time, we do have outside counsel costs on our side because outside counsel is assisting us with the defense of the case. So the costs are potentially significant.
So just to reiterate to the public, referendum question, because I understand, and this, I'm taking my time with this because it's a voting rights issue, which is significant in a democratic society, but also because referendums, I believe in referendums. I believe that the public should have a say in major issues affecting their lives. And on this issue in particular, however, I think that the waters have been muddied on this. And so for the public, when you hear me push back on a referendum, it's not on principle of the referendum, but the reality of where we are with this, that legally the path forward, depending on the outcome, is unclear. And so then we do all of this, which then may trigger who knows how much money besides what's already been spent on defending the case, opposing the case, Weldon Cooper study, the first round of public engagement, we're in a 10-1 system. Now we got to pay for public engagement. So it's a lot of money that's devoted to this issue that that it looks like will not necessarily end after this referendum. So again, for me, it's a question of timing, and it's the question of ultimately, I understand wanting to ask the public, but I want the public to understand we may not be able to do what you want us to do. And depending on the outcome, you're going to be paying a lot of money either way, so.
But I think, if I can, before I get to Stacy, I think the idea is, to come up with the potential of a better way than we had before. That can be a win-win for, more people. That where you're going to have the dedicated 7-1 with 3 potentially minority majority districts that we didn't have before. And, but still have, to me, it's a potential of a compromise. Stacy?
The racial component of the historical 731 district was the fact that we had citywide voting for every district. That's what made it a racial component. By eliminating that, which the Commonwealth did, it takes away that aspect of it, in my view. That now that we have 7 districts versus 10 and 3 at large, without a citywide vote, takes away that racial component. So we're not going back to a system that may very well possibly have been a racially motivated system. No one's proposing to go back to that system. It's a modified 731 system, and I'm not going to speak to the merits of a 731 versus a 10-1 because I want to hear what the people have to say. And if the people have not been given a chance, this is one of the most sacred rights we have, is the right to vote. And if the citizens have not been asked how they want to elect their council members, we're simply asking that, and to try to bear that down to a cost. If the shoe were on the other foot, people would say there's no amount of money that could justify having an unfair voting system, to which I would agree. This is having a referendum is listening to the will of the people. And myself, and I think everybody else, I'm not speaking for everybody, but I would think that whatever the will of the people is, we'll acquiesce to that, whether it's 10-1 or 731. But let's hear what the people had to say. Let's give them a voice. And let's not continue to muddy the waters by saying we're going back to a system that has a racial heritage, because we're not. We're going to a whole new system that we've never tried before.
Hey, Jennifer.
So the issue is the at-large seats, because the issue is that in a system where people are a minority of the voting power, that their voice gets diluted when everybody gets to weigh in on something. So even if there are 3 minority districts in a 7 single-member district, there's still 3 at-large seats that can overwhelm or overcome the will of a minority. So what the claim is for this case that got us to the 10-1 system is the single-member district issue. So for me, whether it's 8, 7 district, whatever, it's the single-member district as opposed to the at-large system. And it's the at-large that's bringing the issue. So we're here for the Virginia Voting Rights Act Section 2 violation, but also I think what we've seen in the past few years is that it's also become a money issue. And I've said this a number of times before, that outside of race, people are able to run in single-member districts. I've said it before, $28,000 as opposed to 6 figures for a seat that pays $28,000. So here we have a system where people are able to run on little money and represent their neighbors, as opposed to at large. And even single member districts, some of these races still got to 6 figures. But in at large races, the cost is even more than that. So in single member districts, we're, in my mind, but again, because I'm advocating, so I'll try to, we're addressing 2 issues: representation, racial representation, but also getting influence of money out of politics by reducing the cost of running a campaign. So But I want to emphasize it's the at-large component that's the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and appreciate the discussion so far. I'll be brief with my comments, but I mean, just taking this in over the last several weeks as we've kind of discussed it, I ran to represent the people of the 9th District and also along with the rest of you to make decisions that help our city move forward. I believe that revisiting this issue in this fashion sends a signal that we're looking backwards. And it's a distraction from our work, especially since there are pending court cases that have yet to be resolved. And I mean, I made a promise to the people of the 9th District. That's my focus. That's my job. We have a map that complies with both federal and state voting rights laws. So unfortunately, I can't support a referendum at this time.
Okay, Hutch?
So just a little different tact here. Just asking some questions. One is Weldon Cooper, for those of us that have been here a year and a half or so, we've used them several times, right? That's a group we've gone to.
I can't speak to that particular center. I know UVA has multiple centers, and I'm not certainly an expert on other studies, but I know we obviously used them for that one.
But we did it. It's validated. You trust it. We should trust it.
Well, I mean, it says what it says, and part of what you asked for was a statistically validated survey. And so you have that data for you, whatever use it is to you.
Right. So that was 83%. So I heard how we used the 60-some% to say that 63% wanted to have a referendum, right? Which sounds right on the thing. I'm offering a second opinion here. Is that if I'm for something and I say I'm for it, and then you ask me a follow-up question with a referendum, I'd be like, well, sure, I've just said it was a good thing, so do the referendum, So I don't know that 63% really says that that's a majority. I know I'm not trying to draw it. I'm just saying it's not necessarily that they're saying you also should have a referendum. We can choose to or not. That's going to be decided. The other part I would say is that I think I'm one of the unique ones that I have run 2 elections at 10 months. And lucky me. And we did spend the 6 figures. So I've had to raise that money twice. It's not easy. Not easy at all. But during that time, I had like 5 open houses and 4 big civic leagues and everything else. And I asked 2 questions at every meeting, every one of them. I said, should our employees be paid? Where should they be paid in the 7 cities? 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, do you care? To a person raising hands, saying stuff, they'd say, I think we should be 1, some were 2. Everybody was above 3. Between 1 and 3, 1 was by far the majority. This is well over 500 people, y'all. The second question I would ask, because the 10-1 is what I came up under, it's what they said I had to win. That's where I set my sights. I asked them about it. Again, overwhelming. They were for the 10-1. It made sense to me that the 80, I was just validating what the Weldon Cooper study said. It was well over 80% of that same group said that they were for the 10-1. So again, I'm thinking that just feels like the right way to go about this for me. Lastly, I would say that, and I know coming up in the fire department, it's what I know, 35 years, and then ultimately being the fire chief. Once you're in the position, then I support that we take in information from everybody, but that it's on us to make the decision. So it's not against the folks doing the vote and everything else, because I think it's going to win overwhelmingly. I just feel like we've been tasked with making this decision, and we've made it. The vote was 10-1 a while back, right? When we first started down this path.
2 years ago.
Yeah. So that to me is like, we've done it again. And then Tiffany, not to put you back on the hot seat, but my quick Kempsville math, not telling you it's perfect. We're well over $1 million spent so far on this project. And then we're going to spend at least another $1 million if it just in education, or not in a million, I'm sorry, 400 grand? Thank you. Yep. She said $500,000 for those that couldn't hear. She wasn't at the mic. $500,000, sorry. She had a communications gap.
Go to the mic, make sure on screen.
But I'm
I can
not
pull
trying to
those
put
numbers
words
up.
in your mouth, but you don't need to go back. But it's $500,000, it's $500,000, right?
It is for the two initiatives to get input on the election system, but also when we redistrict it. So, I mean, I think in general, I prepared for the question. I knew it would be asked, how much would it cost? And this is giving you some historical data of what we have spent in the past. And obviously, this would be an ask should you want to move forward. That would have to be a discussion.
And I don't disagree with Councilman Cummings as far as if it was the other way, we'd spend the money and everything. I'm not arguing that, but this has been vetted now 2 or 3 times. So I'm like, at what point, it's kind of like the study about the host hotel at the oceanfront and all that stuff. How many studies have we done on that there, Councilman?
7.
7. It's like at some point, I'm not going to say it, but it's get off the pot. So that's what I feel like. That's where I feel like we are. So for me, it's a bit confounding. Again, sir, I really understand and appreciate where you had it shoved down your throat, and that's not fair. I don't disagree with that. But I think overall, it's been shown where we are, and that's why I don't understand it. So,
Okay, if I could say this, Hutch, real quick, it's been vetted, but it hasn't been resolved.
No, sir. Right.
Okay, and I think that's the big difference.
Yeah.
And but I just go back, to say that since the Weldon Cooper study, we've had 2 elections. Now we have experience. There's one thing about asking a question on a survey. Aspirationally, what do you think about it off the bat? But now people have working experience. Barbara?
We could stay here all day. We've been talking about this. We've got a lot of important things to do, but I'd just like to comment on 2 or 3 different points because I think we've talked about this a lot, but again, we've not resolved it because the people have not had input, and their voting system is the most important thing people have. And I think the fact that we have always had referendums, if we have changed, and this whole system of changing this major thing, which took away 19 voting positions of our people without giving them a vote on it, was not the right thing to do. But I'll just make a couple of comments on some of the things that have been said here today. I've run 12 campaigns. I lost 2 of them. I won 10 of them. And I have never had 6 figures. All of my campaigns have been with 5 figures, some of them, and I think most of them not more than 50,000. So to say that you have to have a 6-figure campaign to win in this city, of those 12 that I ran, 11 of them were at large. And again, I have never had a 6-figure campaign. I don't raise the big dollars. I think our people are smart as voters. They look to see the person and what the person has to offer. And I really question a legal system that would be determined on determining what our voting system is going to be and what our council makeup is going to be is based on race. Please find for me a place that has a body that is required to be based on race. I really question that legality. And are we only looking at 1 or 2 races? There are a lot of races, and we are discounting some other pretty large groups in our city, such as the Filipinos, and we did have Filipino representation in the past during the at-large system. So I really question a body and an elected body that is based on race. I really question that. But I think not asking the people or giving the people the opportunity to vote is where the mistake was made at the very beginning, and it should never have happened. And that's why I've always voted that we need a referendum. But these are the kinds of things that will come out if we have a referendum. People will be able to debate the issues. And not being able to debate the issues is the problem. And when you have, because our 1995 vote on the system, the General Assembly required us to have another referendum in 96 because the people demanded it. And so the General Assembly required us to have another referendum in 96 with a clearer question. And I think you go back to that and clearly say that's why. When we have a referendum based on something as important as voting, it's pretty daggone important. And I trust our people to do all the debating. I think our people know how to do the right thing. You look at who's elected. Are we going to say our people weren't too smart? They elected me? I think our people are smart, and I think they can handle it.
Okay. At this point, if we don't mind, if we could just come to a decision point, because, we do have, some other things. My suggestion is that we at least go forward and put it on the agenda as stated. But once again, that will provoke a conversation, not only among ourselves, but get the public engaged right now. That being said, does anybody object to moving forward? Hey, Jennifer.
So you're moving forward
and putting it on the agenda,
right?
For 1st May, but there will be public hearings and, things of that nature. Hey, listen, bring it a vote and, who knows? Yeah, but at least let's get it out in the public and get some input. Yes, Patrick.
So for clarification, it is the direction to prepare and present to this council a resolution calling for a special election for this council to consider and vote on.
Not special election, sir. It's
referendum election.
Referendum, and with a public hearing prior to the vote, correct.
So we can have that, the proposed timeline, we can have that available for public comment on the 15th, and then the council could vote at its discretion as early as May 6th.
Okay, at its discretion, yeah.
If it passes, then that would allow time for meeting communications to do the public education effort.
Okay, yes, Jennifer.
In that case, I want all possible communication channels used. So speak up VB, whatever options there are to educate the public. My concern is that this is a major issue. And I just have to say, the history of this country has been race-based government. It's been only white people could be in it, and no other racial group has been enslaved on American soil but Africans enslaved. So there's a very different racial relationship than other immigrant groups. We're the only we're an involuntary immigrant community in this country, as opposed to people choosing to be here for opportunity. We were forced to be here. And so for that reason, this is a very different relationship. The history of this country is that Black people were only considered 3/5 a person. So race has always been used as a tool to shape who's at the table and who has power. With that said, I want to see all possible avenues. I think April 15th is a very limited window for public feedback. There probably are not a lot of opportunity for people, whether they have to work or whatever reason, and this is a major issue for public input. So whatever mechanisms we have to get as much input as possible before, on, and after April 15th and ahead of the May 6th vote, I'd support that.
Okay, thank you. All right, Hutch, so we got to move on.
Yeah, but I just want to state that, so in addition to what I've said before, and I would ask that the business community look, we've been said over and over now that we are a business council, very pro-business. The system is working. So I'm sticking with, for my own reasons, that it's no.
Yeah, you'll have the opportunity to vote.
But I'm saying,
really
I'm not for it, is all. I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah, in a more public forum, okay? All right, Okay, thank you very much. And at this point, Patrick.
Mr. Mayor, does council want us to do? Does council want us to do anything as it regards to communication, like a website or a speak up?
Yeah, let's get it out there, and I wouldn't even mind if the question came out. Okay.
Yeah, the question needs to be.
Yeah, put the question out so this way people can, think. But ultimately, the education will come before the first Tuesday in November. That's the ultimate, and that's when we have closure on this. Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, ahead of the April 15th, we'll put together a project website and also a Speak Up VB initiative. Okay, all right.
Let them know it's coming. Good.
All right, so
Thank you.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, we're ready to transition to the budget.
Transition.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, we'll probably end up cutting some of these departments short.
Okay.
But we'll probably get started with probably 4 or 5 of them for now. But we'll get started with the Commonwealth Attorney. So right now, the Commonwealth Attorney, Colin Stolley, will come and brief the City Council on his proposed budget for your feedback and guidance. Yes, ma'am.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Good to be with all of you again. I'm not intending on going through my PowerPoint. You have all the materials in your binders there. As you can see, the proposed budget for my office for the next year is not increasing or decreasing any positions. It is a pretty stagnant with a very small increase in the amount of funding going on. As a result, what I'd really like to do is try and identify some issues that I see that may be coming up in the future that may require council's attention. If you look in the paperwork there, there is a small portion of my budget that is grant related. And that's 4% of my budget, and it's about $575,000 a year. That is specifically my victim witness program. It's funded through a grant through DCJS. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that DCJS gets those funds for the victim witness program from the federal government through it's called VOCA funds, Victim of Crime Act funds. The VOCA funds are not a federal budgetary item. They are funds that go into that account based on settlements in federal courts, fines, costs, that kind of thing in federal court go into the VOCA funds, and then those monies are distributed to the states throughout the United States. The reason why that's important is in Virginia, that's how victim witness programs are funded. The victim witness programs, for those who are not familiar with it, my prosecutors walk into court with multiple cases that they're going in and they have to focus on, and they're not always there to be able to provide the support that a victim may need in court and leading up to the court date. That's where our victim witness caseworkers come into play. And they fill that very important role of helping guide victims and witnesses through the court system and working with the prosecutors. Again, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is that VOCA funds are drastically dropping over the last few years. DCJS this year prioritized victim witness programs so that they would not take a big hit. But unless the federal government takes significant action, VOCA funds will drop significantly over the next few years, meaning that we would not have the ability to provide that service to victims and witnesses coming in. So I'm bringing this up to say this year I'm not in the budget asking for any more positions, but there could be a scenario in future years where I'm coming and saying, I really need your help to be able to provide the same level of service to the citizens of Virginia Beach in the future. But that's really what I wanted to share, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to my office.
How are you doing, with the personnel to review the body cams?
So for the newer members, body cameras are a huge impact in my office. It's not as simple as buying the cameras and putting them on the officers. The one person who's responsible for watching all the footage related to a criminal case is the prosecutor involved in that case. So this year, we estimate that we're going to receive about 46,000 hours of body camera footage on the cases that we prosecute here in the city of Virginia Beach. That's up from last year, which was about 42,000 hours. It's a really significant impact, and council over the years has been extremely supportive of my office. We've all met and discussed these different issues, and you've provided me with multiple attorneys and with multiple sources of technology to be able to deal with the impact in my office. I'm not going to sit here and say everything's rosy. It is a really huge time suck on the attorneys of being able to prepare their cases, but I think we're at this point at least in a manageable position.
That's good to hear. Patrick?
Mr. Mayor, I do want to acknowledge the Commonwealth Attorney and also just express to the council that technically Mr. Stolly can require us to give him more attorneys. By code, I think we need to give him several more attorneys, but because of a good steward that he is with taxpayer resources and just a team player overall, he has been working with us and only really bringing that request when it gets to the point where it's unbearable with his workforce. And sometimes he even goes lesser than the standard in terms of the level of position that he needs in order to work with the city. So just always forever grateful for working with him. And also, it's the same thing that we're seeing across with the police department as well, while they're asking for additional FOIA support on there as well, is that the requirements that came with the body-worn camera is becoming to the point now where a good chunk of Mr. Stolly's workforce and the police department's workforce is encompassed by providing that legal duty of reviewing every second of the body-worn camera before they go to case or send it over for FOIA.
That's Barbara.
The VOCA grant as something to ask you about, so I'm glad you did, because I think we're going to see this in several budgets with the federal grant money reducing and going, but you said we need to be able to provide the services we've been, and so I think this is going to be an issue that we're going to have to deal with these programs that we want to keep. I think the aging in place is one that we also see, that we see it in another one of these budgets we're looking at today. How we're going to do that is going to be a problem for us. So any recommendations you have, apparently you've achieved it so far, so.
Yes, ma'am, and we're hopeful. I'm on the board of directors for the National District Attorneys Association, and last month we spent quite a bit of time up talking with the Virginia congressional delegation to educate them on the concerns that we have of the reduction of VOCA funds. While it's not a budgetary item or taxpayer funds being used as opposed to court settlements and cost, there are different fixes that hopefully they will be able to take action to mitigate the reduction of those funds. So I only bring it to your attention because I think worst case scenario, I could be sitting here going, these funds have evaporated, but I need to provide this service. But I'm hopeful that we can try and get some fix in place somewhere along the line.
I think we're going to have to come up with something in a lot of different ways. So I appreciate the fact that you've been working on it, and we can look forward to some figuring it out going forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Clearly, this is something we don't want to lose as a program.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, Colin, thank you.
Thank you all. Great to see you.
Brevity is our friend today. That's a good.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time we'll be joined by the Clerk of Circuit Courts, Tina Sinnen. She'll come and brief City Council about her budget requests and our budget overall.
Welcome.
Thank you. Wasn't sure we were going to get here, but anyway, good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, Honorable Council members, Mr. Duhaney, Mr. Stiles. Thanks for having me once again. Seems like the older I get, the quicker these years seem to go by. But I'm here again just to give you a quick reminder that the clerk's office works hard to provide many core services for the citizens of Virginia Beach. We are, of course, on the third floor of Building 10 and 10B. I have 57 full-time positions, including myself. I would venture to say that if you haven't used my office in the past, you will, without a doubt, use my office at some point in your life. Some folks think the clerk's office is just an office of paper pushers. I'm here to tell you that's just far from the truth. All the duties we perform in our office will affect each and every citizen at some stage in their life, whether it's recording your deed for your first house, or better yet, paying off your mortgage and recording your certificate of satisfaction, obtaining a marriage license for yourself or one of your children, becoming a notary, or having to probate a will or estate for a loved one that has passed, or having to qualify as a guardian conservator for your mom or dad who cannot handle their own everyday affairs in their life because of dementia or Alzheimer's. My folks in that department are the best in the state. And don't forget that we are a court of record, the only court of record, permanent records, not for those that come tomorrow, but for those long after we are gone, historical records, if you will. We record all the land records in Virginia Beach, which consisting of deeds, deeds of trust, powers of attorney, judgments, military discharges, DD 214s. We probate wills and estates, handle guardianships for incapacitated adults and minors. That's just all on the recording side. We have this whole other very complex court side. We handle the name changes, adoption, divorce, larger size civil suits, and of course the heinous criminal matters. And all the cases that, all the cases, traffic, civil, criminal cases that are appealed from the district courts come to circuit court. We have 7 sitting circuit court judges in our court running a docket every single day. Some of the services I like to go over that we provide that have made our office more efficient with the use of technology. We provide the ability to apply for a marriage license online before you come down to our office. We also have marriage kiosks in the office to speed up the application process for the staff and the citizens if they don't happen to know that we have an online system. We also provide remote access of our land records information to our community, and we provide an online e-recording system for land records. During the pandemic crisis, this proved to be an extremely helpful tool, having that. Our Officer of the Court Remote Access System, it's called OCRA for the legal community, our e-file Virginia system, which allows for electronic filing of court documents for the court side, our online concealed carry permit program, where someone can apply online for the first time for a concealed carry permit or a renewal permit. That's made the process extremely efficient, not just for my staff, but for the police department staff, and most importantly, the citizen. It's made it a very quick and easy process. We also just recently implemented the property notification feature with our land records. And that's a free service we offer where you can sign up to be notified if any document is recorded regarding your property, actually involving any real estate you may own or be a part owner of. It doesn't eliminate the fraud, but it lets the consumer know immediately if something has been recorded regarding that property so that it can be handled sooner rather than later. And that's the big talk among clerks' offices throughout the Commonwealth about the deed fraud that's happening, not just in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but through the United States. We continue striving to enhance our services by way of technology, and that's no easy task because we all know technology is very expensive. We continue to try to make our Supreme Court case management system better for the legal community who depend on it. We continue with our court case information with electronic docket boards in the courthouse on the first floor and in front of each courtroom so that it's easy for them to find their way where they need to be. We continue moving to become completely fileless in our civil department as well as our criminal department. We will continue in our efforts to use common sense technology to be more efficient for the citizens of Virginia Beach. The technology in the clerk's office regarding land records and the more complicated court cases continue to be a very cost-effective component that greatly benefits the locality by reducing costs as well as aiding many city departments in the services they offer. Please keep in mind that just the maintenance alone on the land record system and the Supreme Court systems cost me right around $500,000 right now per year. But currently, there's no cost to the locality in using the systems, and there's very minimal cost to the locality in providing funds for those systems. Now more than ever, we know and have experienced that these systems are critical in providing services to the public, whether we're an open building or not. I did want to mention there is a piece of legislation that will have a profound effect on the workload in my office. Senate Bill 1339, which it was actually passed in 2021. It's kind of been put off for the last 4 years. It's identical House Bill 2113 establishes a process for the automatic sealing of police and court records for certain convictions, deferred dispositions, acquittals, as well as offenses that have been null pros or otherwise dismissed. The bill also allows for petition-based sealing of records related to certain convictions. The Supreme Court has been working on an electronic piece. We haven't seen it yet. Makes me a little nervous. The legislators forget that the circuit court, we're a permanent record office. So our permanent records didn't start with electronics. It started with paper, microfilm, microfiche, and now we have the electronic piece. This legislation was supposed to begin in July of this year, but the Court Clerks Association has been working with the Virginia Crime Commission, which Colin is a part of as well, to get that pushed back until January of 2026. I understand I've heard actually the governor changed that date to start July of 2026 before he signed the bill. So I'm not exactly sure where that stands when we start. But it will definitely put a burden on my staff to research and find all the records and get them sealed so they're not viewable by the public, and also a burden on how we move forward with separate criminal charges, convictions, and the individual orders that the judges will have to sign regarding those convictions. Typically, if a defendant has 20 charges, they're typically put on one order. And that's not going to be the case any longer. We have to prepare for some of those records to actually be available to be sealed. So I don't want to get in all the weeds with it yet, but I did feel like I needed to mention it. That's going to have an impact on the staff in my office. So as you know, all the state funding I get is salary reimbursement for 52 FTEs, including some of the fringes. The city funding I receive pays for 5. Very grateful for those 5 FTEs. And the daily operational costs to efficiently run my office. Most of everything we receive in our budget is funded for salaried employees, state and city. And the total budget number combining state funding and locality funding is $4 million, is a little over $4.9 million. The state reimbursement sits at $4.1 million, which consists of the salaries, some fringes, and the city is contributing approximately $840,867. And the operating expenses we're keeping around $520,000, and that includes the contracted manpower that you all give me. We are still the second largest jurisdiction in Virginia. Hoping we keep that stance. I'm waiting for Loudon to tell me that they're number 2, but hope not. We continue to keep our actual operating expenses very low, considering the fact that we are the second largest. This budget continues to allow us to maintain an acceptable responsiveness with the workload to continue to serve the citizens of Virginia Beach and to also help in our role of public safety to the community. Our office currently continues to be an excess fee office, and what I mean by that is some of the fees that we charge pay for funding of our own office, and whatever's left over comes back to us in the excess fee, which benefits the entire Commonwealth and the locality. Hope that kind of makes sense. I love my job as the Circuit Court Clerk for Virginia Beach. I'm proud of my folks, and I do get excited talking about all they do, and it's a lot, and just how well they do it. I know that we are technically a constitutional office, but when anyone asks me who I work for, I proudly say the City of Virginia Beach, and I do believe that every day we represent the City of Virginia Beach as well as we can because, again, my staff is really good at what they do. I know that they are true public servants. I'm very thankful to my city for realizing that all the core government services that the clerk's office does provide its citizens. We're still playing catch up on the court side with the many jury trials taking place on the court's dockets. But as always the rule, being public servants and the customer service we provide still remains our priority. To serve the citizens with the best customer service is always our goal. It is of utmost importance to me, and I believe that my folks strive to do that every day. And I thank you all, and I'll be willing to answer any questions that you all might have.
I just want to say what a great job you do, but also, I guess your part-time job with the Board of Elections and everything too.
That takes a little bit of time
job,
too.
don't you?
Yes, we do help Christine's office. I hope that she feels that we were instrumental in helping them achieve that building that they so desperately need to have the elections all in one place instead of being in 4 different locations. That makes it very difficult for her if there's a problem with the cap, then she's got to run from wherever she is to wherever they're doing, the central absentees. It makes it very difficult.
Really appreciate you. Barbara?
So, yes, ma'am.
I'm looking at the right page here.
Yes, ma'am.
Your budget reduced 411,000 in
It's
your
because
operating
risk
costs?
management they reduced the cost. My risk management, and that's something I don't have any control over, used to be around 600,000. They reduced it to 147,000.
Well, I just thought that was significant.
It's pretty significant. It's probably because I don't know, if you ask Jeff Rosen, I probably call him too much. And he's usually the one that represents me if I have a mandamus to deal with. But I guess that means I've been a good girl, Barbara. I'm not sure if that does or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Great job, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, cool. All right, so Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time we'll be joined by the Virginia Beach Public Schools, and I think we were joined by the board chair with Chairwoman Kathleen Brown, and also the superintendent and the school CFO, as well as the school COO.
Hey, welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, Mayor Dyer, Vice Mayor Wilson, members of council. My name is Kathleen Brown, Chair of the Virginia Beach School Board. Today I'm joined by board members Mr. Bowensteel, Ms. Rogers, Mr. Callen. I think there's one more. Who am I missing? Okay. If I missed anybody, I apologize. I'm also joined by staff, Superintendent Dr. Robertson, Chief Financial Officer Crystal Pate, and Melissa Ingram. In January, Vice Chair Weems and I engaged with board members to confirm the board's collective budget priorities. There was a clear consensus on focusing on compensation, followed closely by expanding workforce development. I want to highlight a few key areas that align with these priorities, which you will see on slide 9 during Ms. Pate's presentation, not to steal her thunder. Of the projected $30 million in increased revenues offset by $10.8 million in position reductions, the board has approved a budget request that dedicates roughly $34 million to increase compensation and benefits. I'm also excited to share that recognizing the growing demand for workforce development, this budget expands offerings to include an increased welding lab at the Renaissance Academy, expansion of aviation maintenance, medical assisting programs, career studies certificates at TCC. Additionally, I'm pleased to highlight that a portion of the budget balancing reflects the recent school board approval of a regional recovery high school, which you're going to see reflected in funds allocated for transportation costs. Much like council is experiencing, we are balancing competing needs in an inflationary environment. Within the approved CIP, the board has prioritized a creative approach to updating the learning environment for students at Betty F. Williams. Finally, I want to just take a moment to thank you for having us. I appreciate the strong partnership that we've been able to cultivate with council and recognize the critical role you play in the success of our school division. I thank you for the ongoing support in recognizing the great work of our schools, the programs we offer, and the values schools add to our city. With that, I turn it over to Dr. Robertson.
Thank you, Chairwoman Brown, and good afternoon. I want to echo the comments made by the Chairwoman, and I also want to acknowledge and thank the mayor and city manager for giving Virginia Beach City Public Schools a shout out at the annual State of the City address. We certainly appreciate that. I know one of the things that any governing body has to do is really look critically at return on investment. And what I mean by return on investment is it's an accepted measure of a net gain or improvement based on an investment. And quite frankly, when the city gives us funds, they are making an investment in learning. And as the mayor and city manager mentioned, in the State of the City, there were a number of accolades that Virginia Beach has, and I would offer just a couple more of our return on investment that we provide back to the city based upon the work in the schools. First of all, Virginia Beach City Public Schools continues to lead the state on state standards of learning test performance. We are the top performing school division in the Commonwealth with more than 30,000 students. And when you look at all 131 school divisions, we're in the top 7. Which says a lot about our school division. We know that workforce development is critically important, and we continue to lead the state in the number of students or number of industry certifications that students earn in comparative to all school divisions in the Commonwealth. There's only one school division that mirrors the total number of industry certifications that we receive every year, and they are 3 times larger than we are. We know that not only do we want prepare our students to be enrolled, enlisted, employed, we want when our students get enrolled to be prepared to be successful in college. And so we have seen a dramatic increase in the number of kids in advanced placement courses, dual enrollment courses, and at the same time, their performance has gone up. With multiple academy and advanced academic programs from which students and families can choose, Virginia Beach City Public Schools offers a true school choice model where students can explore their passion, whether that be, again, toward enrollment, enlistment, or employment after high school. And then finally, there are 7 former Virginia Beach City Public Schools administrators that are leading school divisions in the Commonwealth. There is no other school division in the Commonwealth that has more sitting superintendents than those that started their career in Virginia Beach City Public Schools. At this point, I'll again turn it over to Ms. Pate, who will take you through a brief presentation.
Hope you stay here, Don.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of City Council, Mr. Dehaney. Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to begin by noting that the General Assembly has not yet approved a state budget. The budget presented today is based on the governor's proposed budget, which was released back in December of 2024. As of now, the General Assembly is scheduled to reconvene tomorrow, April 2nd, to review and consider the governor's proposed amendments to the spending bill. We do remain optimistic that a finalized state budget will be approved following the discussions and negotiations over the past week. The portion of this presentation focuses primarily on the school operating fund budget, which increased a little over 3.1% from the fiscal year 2024-25 budget. This slide outlines our key challenges. Like many organizations, we are facing the impact of inflation on operational costs, driving up the prices of essential goods and services necessary for our day-to-day functions. Employee compensation remains an ongoing challenge, particularly in recruitment and retention as we compete with neighboring localities. While we have consistently worked to provide annual salary increases, other divisions have done the same, making it difficult to improve our position in the rankings for entry-level salaries. I will address the specifics of compensation included in the budget in a later slide. Benefits have also become a growing concern for the division, especially in the area of health insurance. A few years ago, we reduced employee health insurance rates to enhance recruitment and retention efforts. However, rising healthcare claims, increased medical costs, a shift in employee enrollment from the high deductible plan to the point of service plan, and an increase in high-cost claims have led to a rapid depletion of the health fund balance. Contributions from both employees and the employer have not been sufficient to cover projected costs. To address the shortfall, there was an employer contribution increase that took effect January 1st of 2025. And in this proposed budget, we have included increased employer rates effective January 1st, 2026, adding $8 million to further stabilize the fund. Based on consultations with Mercer, the health fund is currently projected to be stable for now. However, an employee contribution increase may be necessary effective for the plan year beginning January 1st, 2026, to maintain the fund's health and work towards the recommended 2-month reserve. We continue to closely monitor the health fund to ensure long-term financial stability. Another well-documented challenge of the school division is our capital improvement program, particularly regarding facility maintenance and the condition of aging buildings. I'll not go into additional detail at this moment, as Ms. Ingram will provide further insights on this topic later in the presentation. A growing concern is the uncertainty surrounding federal K-12 education funding, particularly programs under the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, and title programs such as Title I, which are critical for supporting students with disabilities, low-income students, and specialized services. Recent headlines and shifting federal priorities have raised significant questions about the future administration and oversight of these funds, including discussions about reorganizing or reducing the size and role of federal education agencies, including a nearly 50% reduction in the U.S. Department of Education's workforce, fueling uncertainty about how key programs will be managed and delivered. While federal officials have publicly committed to maintaining funding for programs like Title I and IDEA, there have been discussions about shifting responsibilities to other federal agencies or state-level administration. The exact path forward remains uncertain, but as a division, we must assess our exposure to federal funding, understand what is at stake, and proactively try and plan for multiple scenarios, including possible changes in fund administration, compliance requirements, and oversight structures. And lastly, state budget considerations. Revenue growth is slowing. Although the General Assembly initially proposed eliminating the support cap during its recent session, the governor's amendment significantly reduced the funding associated with this change. Again, we hope to receive additional guidance after the reconvened General Assembly session tomorrow. So as outlined in the superintendent's estimate of needs for fiscal year 25-26, we anticipate a 1.11% increase in state revenue over our amended 24-25 budget and a projected 6.09% increase in state sales tax. However, recent trends indicate a decline in state sales tax, and it is unclear whether these projections will hold. This slide represents the total budget across all of our funds, amounting to approximately $1.18 billion. The school operating fund is the largest portion, accounting for around $995 million, or 84.5% of the overall budget. Categorical grants make up 9.3% of the budget, totaling approximately $109 million. Other funds, including the Instructional Technology Fund, Athletics Fund, Equipment Replacement Fund, vending operations, cafeterias, and textbooks, constitute 5.8% of the budget, or about $68 million. Additionally, Green Run Collegiate, a public charter school, represents 0.4% of the budget, totaling approximately $5 million. This slide provides an overview of the revenue sources and their corresponding percentages that make up the school operating fund. As shown, the largest funding source is the local contribution from the city, accounting for 49.6% of the budget. State funding includes state sales tax, represents the second largest source at 48.5%. Federal funding contributes 1.5%, and other local revenue sources make up 0.4%. On the left side of the slide, a chart illustrates the estimated additional revenue over the fiscal year 24-25 amended adopted budget from all sources, totaling approximately $30.1 million, again based on the governor's introduced budget. The increase in revenue from the revenue sharing formula with the city is projected at $20.4 million, as outlined in the city's 5-year forecast. However, this estimate does not account for any fluctuations related to the over or underperformance of city revenues. And additionally, state revenue, including state sales tax, is expected to increase by approximately $9.7 million. While examining the school operating fund by major category classifications, as you would expect, the instructional portion is the largest at 73.3%. The second largest category is operation and maintenance, which accounts for 12% of the budget. People transportation follows at 5.3%, while technology and admin, attendance, and health each make up 4.7%. It's important to note that these categories are prescribed by the State Board of Education and outlined in Virginia Code. This slide presents school operating expenditures by type. As expected, given the labor-intensive nature of our operations, personnel and fringe benefits account for just over 86% of total expenditures. The remaining 14% consist of non-personnel expenses, the majority of which are non-discretionary, covering essential costs such as contractual obligations, fuel, and utilities. This leaves only a small portion of that 14% available for discretionary spending or budget flexibility. On the side of the slide, you'll find the corresponding dollar amounts for each expenditure category. So moving on to the budget balancing. This slide just outlines our proposed revenue estimates and the superintendent's estimate of needs. I've kind of covered that earlier in the presentation, totaling that $30.1 million. Approximately 68% of this is as from the city at the $20.4 million. That's from the revenue sharing formula. The state is expected to increase by $4.3 million, while state sales tax is projected to increase by approximately $5.4 million. So in total, state revenue accounts for about 32%, or $9.7 million of the total projected additional revenue. This is a very difficult slide to read, and I apologize for that. This next slide has been updated, from the printed estimate of needs through the correction and the instructional compensation line, but it outlines how additional $30.1 million is allocated, and it prioritizes employee compensation and stabilizing the health insurance fund. And we mentioned earlier the shortfall in the health insurance fund, and based on that analysis, we've included employer contribution equating to $8 million. A school board presentation a few weeks ago provided an overview of consolidated benefits, and in that presentation, we briefed the board on the financial situation and also presented a couple of options for consideration related to an increase in the employee contributions effective for the plan year beginning January 1st, 2026. These options were designed to illustrate the impact on employee paychecks, but no final decisions have been made. Maintaining a healthy health fund and achieving the recommended 2-month reserve balance remain key objectives. The largest portion of the additional revenue is dedicated to employee compensation. The approved superintendent's estimate of needs includes $14.3 million to fund a 2% increase in entry-level salary with a 1.5% step for employees on the instructional scale, $10.7 million to fund a 3% increase in entry-level salary for employees on the unified scale with a 1% step for employees 1 to 14 years of experience and a 1.5% step for employees with 15 plus years of experience for employees on the unified scale. Some of the key budget items to highlight: there's $750,000 to reinstate approximately half of the funding for school bus replacements that we cut last year due to the 2-cent reduction in the real estate tax rate. There's a $129,000 increase in the athletic fund transfer due to the city's transition to the off-duty management system, which raised hourly rates for police officers. There's $529,702 for 12 special education teacher assistants positions at the middle and high school level. $107,793 for an instructional position for the welding lab expansion at Renaissance Academy. $140,000 for career and technical education pathways expansion, including dual enrollment courses in aviation maintenance and medical assisting, which are new courses approved earlier this year. $101,075 for an additional gifted resource teacher to accommodate the rise in gifted identification and services, including expanding gifted talent development to all second grade students. $400,000 for the increased cost of homeless education transportation as required by federal law. $1,925,384 for 19.8 English as a second language teachers in response to a new state funding methodology that aligns staffing with student proficiency levels. $117,478 for a multimedia communication technician following the city's discontinuation of VBTV services, which broadcast school board and other public meetings. $107,650 for the early commitment incentive for student teachers, offering incentives to student teachers who complete at least 18 weeks in our division helps us compete for top teaching talent. $156,435 for transportation costs related to a new career and technical education courses and the welding lab expansion. $229,500 for rising technology maintenance costs, including licensing, hosting, software application upgrades, and support for Genetech, which is a security system platform, and Tariga, which is an online system for tracking and supporting school division services assets related to buildings, construction, roofs, HVAC systems, floors, windows, and more. There's $1 million for planned general maintenance and repairs, $300,000 for custodial cleaning supplies, $198,634 for landscape services, primarily to cover compensation increases for city-provided services, $138,212 for the Rave Mobility Panic Button application software, $683,760 to fund the final phase of hiring 15 security assistants for the remaining elementary schools who currently only have 1 security assistant. And the final item on the slide has to do with addressing the budget deficit. To close the 10.8 deficit noted on this slide, the superintendent is looking to take action, specifically staffing reductions in the central office affecting both the unified and instructional scale positions. It is important to note and emphasize that no current BBCPS employee will lose their job. Reductions will be made through vacant positions or employees transitioning to other roles. These budget adjustments will be managed through unfilled vacancies in less critical areas and natural attrition. A thorough review of all positions has taken place to identify roles that can be eliminated without compromising instructional quality or operational efficiency. Continuous review and refinement of this budget is ongoing, making adjustments as the school division's financial landscape evolves. This fiscal year 2025-26 budget remains focused on employee compensation, with 83% of the additional revenue dedicated to salaries and benefits. To attract and retain highly qualified educators and support staff, BBCPS must remain competitive in the job market. At this time, I will hand the presentation over to Ms. Melissa Ingram, Executive Director in the Office of Facility Services, who will present the proposed capital improvement program budget.
Yeah, Barbara?
You have said a tremendous amount. And I don't think it's fast.
And very
Can I get
quickly.
a copy of your comments, please?
Yes, ma'am, you certainly can.
Oh, thank you, because you had a lot of information, and I'm not that fast. Thank you very much.
Nobody is.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ms. Pate. My name is Melissa Ingram. I'm Executive Director of Facility Services, and I'm here today to review the VBCPS Capital Improvement Program, which deals with both new construction and renovation and replacement projects for the school division. So in front of you here is the March 11th CIP proposed funding sources for fiscal year 26, which remains relatively the same as last year. Continuing is the planned increase of PAYGO annually and equal reduction in planned reversion funding, with the combined goal of inputting more cash funding into the CIP. New this year, outlined in red, is a larger planned reversion line item for the upcoming fiscal year 26, which increased the total funding from fiscal year 26 from $61.3 million to $71.3 million, dedicating those additional planned reversion funds to Princess Anne High School Replacement School. Looking out over the 6-year CIP, funding otherwise remains flat at $61.8 million. Also new to this budget cycle, for planning purposes, the added table at the top in green shows the school division's plan for debt service funding, working to build capacity for the replacement of school needs and planning to increase the debt service budget roughly $6 million annually starting in fiscal year 27. Now looking at the projects in the March 11th CIP proposed funding summary table, identified by the first red box is Princess Anne High School Replacement Project, CIP 1-015, and this is the priority replacement school for the school division. With funding sources we've just reviewed not increasing over the next 6 years, this project is not fully funded within this 6-year CIP and is planned to start construction in 2037. This year, we have reduced CIP 1-028, which is also highlighted with a red box under the first red box. Formerly, this was an over $100 million replacement school project. It's now been reduced to $27 million while working to also eliminate the school division's 2 oldest assets, moving Bayside 6th grade students to Bayside Middle School starting in school year 25 in the fall of 2025, which would remove those students from the old Aragona School at Jericho Road. And then also by looking at the tri-campus model to have 2 schools rather than 3 schools serve that attendance zone. This project, Tri-Campus Additions, is fully funded in the 6-year CIP. Looking at the school division's proposed modernization replacement program, the planned timeline is to bid Tri-Campus Additions in 2026, with the updated Princess Anne High School and Bayside High School replacement dates moved out to begin construction in 2037 and 2051, respectively. The school division will continue our work to look for ways to meet our capital needs, including exploring new paths to school construction and modernization. A working group of key personnel to include the Superintendent's Office, Department of Budget and Finance, and the Department of School Division Services, Office of Facility Services, looks forward to providing an update to the school board in the fall timeframe. With the key drivers of this work looking at solutions for funding the capital improvement program and related debt service needs. And with that, we're happy to take any questions, and thank you for your time today.
Questions, Stacy?
Thank you very much. One question, I know you probably don't have an exact answer to this, but in your proposed revenues. You're looking at 387,000 from the state. Knowing what's in flux there, how much of that is at risk?
Right now, what we think is at risk is on the support cap. The General Assembly came in with about 223 million to lift the support cap that's been in place since the recession. The governor's amendments that came back to General Assembly reduced it down to 85 million. And so we expect that that's probably the most at risk when negotiations take place.
Okay, Rosemary, and then Josh, and then Barbara.
I have several questions. One is, I really had a little trouble following you about the salaries with this and then the cap and the step. And can you combine the step with what's going to be raised so that it's one number rather than two numbers for different levels? And
So we have two pay scales. One's in the instructional pay scale. Right now, what's in the superintendent's estimate of needs is a 2% increase in the starting salary with a 1.5% step. That scale has a 1.5% step through the entire scale. So that's 3.5%. On the unified scale, to get everyone in that scale at least 3% based on the lowest paid employees within that scale, the starting salaries increased at 3%. If you have 1 to 14 years of experience, you get another 1%, so that's 4. And then if you have 15 plus years of experience, it would be the 3% plus 1.5, and that would be 4.5. And so that's the way it sits in this approved budget, but certainly there's conversations regarding that.
right, so I think there's going to be another 3 million coming from the city that was not in the 5-year forecast.
Right, we didn't know until that presentation. Yeah.
I just want you to confirm.
Yes.
And then the state's got another 10-something million.
That's the support cap. So right now, the way it sits, it's about $10.8 million. But if the governor's reduction comes into play, we stand to lose a good chunk of that.
I find really unlikely that budget amendment will be supported because we're not going to want to cut public education. Just like
We hope not.
Yeah, like last year, I kept saying that money's going to come through, and the day before we voted on our budget, that 16 million came through.
Right. I think all divisions are hoping that does not happen.
So, and I know that there's a lot of discussion for that to be for salaries.
It is. It'll come through our basic aid, so that is flexible money for us. With the other piece of that is there's about 2.9 million right now that's designated for special education, so that has to go directly to special education.
So you're at 14 million, and sort of unaccounted for money that's not in Dr. Robertson's budget. So we just did a market salary survey, and we found out, that some people were really being underpaid, and some people were being over what they should have been, over the 100%. And so we're trying to, it's very complicated. I don't know how everybody does it, Mr. Haney, but sort of balance that out. So we're not giving everybody the same amount of raises. And I know the schools tend to do that, but then we always hear teachers need to make more money, teachers need to make more money. And almost 12,000 employees, when you give everybody the same amount of money, then teachers don't get as much as to raise theirs, like everybody feels like teachers should be making more money. So is there any, I'm gonna get to my question, sorry. Is there any intention of, maybe you already know this without doing a market salary survey, of really where everybody falls on the scale? Because you're gonna have teachers and then other categories that aren't the same. So we all know teachers need to be paid more, but maybe there's another category, I'm not gonna pick on administrators, that seem to be making enough, whoever those categories are, so that you can sort of give the money to where, to balance it out for the market salary survey. So do you ever look at doing something like that?
So we did a market salary study a couple of years ago, and it found that for the teacher pay scale, our comparisons really are not necessarily the state of Virginia. They're more regional into the area that we are. And so right now, our starting salary is at the bottom. After 5 and 10 years, we move up into the mid-range of the 7 school divisions. So from a market standpoint, instructionally, we're towards the low end. When you look at the unified scale, there are positions on the unified scale where we're underpaying individuals because of comparable skills in the private sector, and the other areas we are paying market rates at this point. So we feel like we've got a really good handle on what the appropriate rates are, and we feel like giving everybody the same percentage raise at this point is the best thing to do, which is what we would like to try to do with additional state funds. One of the things we'd like to try to do.
So, switching gears on us, 2037 for Princess Anne High School. I mean, that's really,
Yeah.
that is terrible news.
Yeah.
And let me finish.
Okay.
I think, and Stacy and I were in the school modernization, I think we could get there sooner than that by talking to our budget people. There's a pathway to do that, and there's different tools that you could have. Like, not every school has to be totally LEED certified. I mean, our buildings are not all LEED certified. We've got, it doesn't mean you have to, it doesn't mean you have to not totally do any LEED certifications, but it doesn't have to be 100%. So I really think you need to look at this totally LEED certified, and that could probably save some money. And of course, you know, some value engineering and some other things. And so bring those numbers down, because Princess Anne High School costs $500 million. I mean, who knows when Bayside will ever get done. So we have other schools in First Colonial, and I'd really, and I think a lot of members of this council would really like to see you work on these numbers and ways to get to a better pathway to, let's, as I said at a reversion fund meeting one time, let's get something built. You know, we want to get these schools built, and Princess Anne High School's right in the center of the city, and it's the oldest high school. I think it'd be, that's just, 2037 is just really unacceptable. We've got to do better than that. And then, something else. Oh, and we have this in our CIP too. And I could probably ask our staff the same question, but I did notice that Princess Anne High School had almost $9 million for instruction, support and inspections. Could y'all explain that number for me, please?
Can I answer the first question that you had first about 2037? So I pulled this slide back up because we agree completely with what you just said, that we need to take a brand new approach at looking at the CIP and what we can do with schools, because 2037 is unacceptable to us as well. But right now, we're working off the numbers that we have that were a part of a previous design. Once we go into a new design, we don't know what that number is going to be. These are just projection numbers. So the idea is, as soon as our budget's done, I'm going to put together this work group. We're going to go in and think completely outside the box. I've had conversations with the city manager. He and I are going to sit down. He's going to walk me through the process the city uses from a CIB budget perspective, because we're committed to being able to get to Princess Anne High School much sooner than 2037, as well as have a viable plan for the long term to address building needs. So that's the purpose of this work group. We'll update the school board in the fall, and we think you're going to be very excited about what you hear. But at this particular juncture, we're working off the best possible information that we have to be true to the process.
And I really appreciate that answer. And I have sung your praises about what you've done with Bayside 6th grade campus and Betty Williams. I mean, that was a stroke of genius.
Well, that was a collective board discussion. A number of ideas came about, and so I'm not going to take credit for that one. That was good ideas at the table, that came around to that solution. And I think we can be there again to share in the fall. That's going to make us be in a position to be more aggressively address some of the challenges we have, and at the same time help out the city with some of the challenges you have. And you're
You want to answer that?
And thank you, Dr. Robertson. So, to Dr. Robertson's point, again, we, work to be as efficient as possible with our CIP program. There are certain, industry standards. Construction cost, as outlined in the CIP, would be looking at, inflation as it might grow to 2037, and then certain percentages of the construction costs that we would be paying to a contractor to actually build the building. There are other fees that are not included in that contractor cost, one of which is furniture, fixtures, and of the like, which we have to provide for. Design fees is another, and then inspections and support is another. So that's the reason that's broken out in the CIP that way. Of course, if there's any savings in any of those categories, we would, of course, try to, get those savings out of it. But we're trying to plan accordingly for what we see as industry standards in terms of percentage of construction cost needs.
Thank you. And it's good news that you're going to be re-looking at.
Okay, we're going to go with Josh, Barbara, and then Michael, and then Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for your presentation and the information. I just want to also thank the board chair and Dr. Robertson. And y'all have been wonderful in terms of your outreach and collaboration, meeting one-on-one with council members, and and I know that'll. And I'm looking at a couple friends on the school board in the audience, and it's great. It's better when we collaborate, and it's better when we get to know each other as people, so that we have that mutual trust with one another. I share the vice mayor's concerns about Princess Anne High School, but I'm relieved to hear that you have a plan to reshape your CIP and to work with the city manager. Princess Anne scares me. Bayside scares me even more. Looking at almost $1 billion, and I know that's basically just throwing a dart at the wall and trying to backfill a number. Because what also scares me on top of that is everything behind it. And you know better than I do, Melissa. So I just again appreciate all the work, and I look forward to seeing something different, I guess, when that work is complete. And I know this isn't necessarily budget right now, but it certainly impacts it. I think this is another reason for us, city and schools to go lock arm in arm, and maybe other jurisdictions. I'm trying to get that lottery money back designated to school construction like we were promised in the first place that it was supposed to go to. So I know the state increased their school construction grant by $50 million. That is not enough, and we really, really need to be on our state legislature in unison to demand that those lottery funds be returned and employed to the use that they promised us it was going to be put toward.
In looking at your revenue sources, I know we get a very small amount from the federal. I think you show 1.5% of your budget, and it's less than 15 million. Is that a standard amount, or does that come from grants or particular programs?
In the operating budget, it's not grants, it's impact aid, and then it's Medicaid reimbursements.
So the impact aid is, well, I'm looking at these programs that are potentially going to have cuts. Those would be in addition to anything you have. I'm thinking about programs like the breakfast program and the lunch programs. That's different.
It is that's in our cafeterias fund, not in the operating budget, and so that cafeterias fund is self-sufficient. But they do receive that money in those programs as well. And then on the other grants that I mentioned, like IDEA and Title I, and we have several federal grants, that's in our categorical grant fund. So it's outside of the operating budget.
Yeah, Ms. Henley, you asked a great question. One of the things that we're doing to prepare for what could happen at the federal level is I stay well connected to my counterparts in Washington. I had a conversation with Congresswoman Kiggins on Friday, and we feel like Title I is protected at this point, but we're really concerned about some of the other title grants. So my team right now, where some of those title grants actually have positions tied to those grants and coaches and specialists, we're having conversations with those coaches and specialists right now that they need to be very mindful that they are grant funded. And if there's not a grant, if it's reduced, then we're going to need to try to plug them in somewhere else so they don't lose their job. So we are concerned about some of our grant funded positions based upon what may or may not happen in the next couple of months in Washington.
Well, that's, been a concern of mine, and if we're not going to be able to make up everything that's going to be not coming. We just can't
You're
do
correct.
that.
We
But
would not be able
we're
to.
going to have to make some difficult choices, and I guess you're preparing for that to see what are those things that we really have to make sure these kids don't go without.
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
It'll be tough. You are ahead of that, though. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
ma'am.
Okay, Michael Worth and Cash.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, thank you all for being here. This is a great opportunity, not only to review the budget annually, but to thank you and also all the colleagues that you represent for your outstanding service and work to our community. I am among those who prioritize public education, and I think it's safe to say that prioritization is reflected in our city's annual municipal budget as the most substantial percentage of our investment, as Superintendent Robertson said. And so we're all in agreement about that, and I have no doubt will continue to be. Another issue that remains a priority for Virginia Beach residents is affordability. And I know you're aware of that as well in this climate and in general. And to follow up on some of the questions the Vice Mayor shared, and if you could go back to the slide with the red boxes, the CIP funding summary.
This one here, sir?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. I'm having sticker shock about Princess Anne High School replacement at $500 million and Bayside High School replacement, and I'm not sure what year that's Can you tell me what year that's programmed?
So that would be 2051. So when we first took a look at this, we were trying to get this bid in 2027. And at that time, and again, this is a total project cost, including design, as Ms. Wilson mentioned, inspection support, furniture fixtures, was at $300 million.
That was part of the PPEA?
No, the PPA was even less than that because they would have bid that earlier on, and then they were also bundling. We just didn't have enough debt service to be able to get to all three in the PPEA. So however, when we were working on this budget cycle, we had Princess Anne High School estimated construction project costs at roughly $300 million. Then changing it, we had to take a look at our funding sources and our bonds. So we had to then look forward and delay the project for construction start about 10 years. And looking at inflation, we do an annual look at inflation. COVID years were definitely very tight. We had future inflation at about 6.2% for school construction last year. We lowered that this year to about roughly 5.6%. So we look at that annually, but we don't want to be in a situation where we are projecting a project cost that is unrealistic looking forward. So we do have to project that price for when we think we can go ahead and bid that project. So that is what
This may
results.
be unrealistic in the other direction, but that's also a subjective point of view. A colleague pointed out to me, and I just did a quick search and verified it. I'm looking at an article posted by WHRO on January 31st of this year, indicating that the city of Norfolk budgeted $137 million for the Maury High School replacement. And this is meant to be completed and open in 2029. So why the disparity?
So any disparity might be because one is a construction cost, one is a complete project cost. So that's what we're showing you here in the CIP. where the construction cost itself would be in the $200 million range. If we were to bid it, if we were to go to bid today, it would be even less than that. So basically what we're doing is we're looking forward to see how much debt service capacity we have, how much appropriations we have, and then forecasting when we think we can start construction, and then giving a project budget for that time frame, sir.
So when I'm looking at the article, it says the city budgeted $137 million. This is the city of Norfolk for Maury, 30 million, which is coming from a state grant, and 20 is for the cost of the design. So you're telling me their complete project cost is above 137 million? And then you may not know.
I don't know.
And as a follow-up, could I get an apples to apples comparison on Maury High School versus some of the other schools? I think it's a fair question. And I think, you know, when I'm looking at this article, I'm looking at $500 million versus, and I know we're talking about a different time frame, versus $1 billion versus 137 million. I think we need I would like a better sense of what Norfolk is doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, we can certainly look into that.
Quite disparate.
Sure, and these are our high school costs, so much larger buildings, you know.
That's a high school too.
Yeah, I understood. And we've been building our elementary schools for lower costs.
And if I could provide an update, I spoke to the Norfolk superintendent last week.
I'm going in front of the speaker.
Yep. I spoke to the Norfolk superintendent last week. That project now came in to bid for Norfolk or Maury High School at $241 million, and the city asked them to adjust that down to $221 million.
Okay.
So, and I asked Mr. Freeman at that
Today's
point.
dollars, and you're talking
Yes,
about
sir.
20, 30 something for.
That's correct. And we have asked Mr. Freeman, his team is working on what is exactly going into Maury High School, how is that going to look, so that we can get a better idea of what could come to play at at Prince Anne High School, because that's sticker shock for all of
It's
us.
sticker shock. And then even I would say further, I've seen, and this is, you know, I have to take this with the large, you know, with some qualifications, but I've seen on social media and other things, some comparison. I don't know if it was Loudoun County or some other county just built a school, and just what I'm seeing in the perception is that our costs are so much higher than other communities. And I don't know if that's related to the LEED certifications or some other things. I know we want to build great facilities for students and the people who work there. I'm just really curious about what are those efficiencies that we can adopt to continue to do things like pay teachers more and provide great services for the students and have a great place to learn. And I'm not suggesting you're not meeting that, but I'm just curious what other communities are doing. And we hear a lot, and I don't always go and research it independently, but I hear a lot about the comparisons are out of sync.
Yeah, we're in complete agreement.
Okay, you know, if we could try to expedite things. Thank you, Michael. That was excellent stuff, and everybody's, but go ahead and Worth and then Cash.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be very quick, and everyone else, of course, compliments you all on your work, and I appreciate it too. Just a quick question. Your budget presentation today is a part of that was presented last week. It's folded in, it accommodates, there's no disparity.
It is. It is basically, Kevin and Katie, it is the one that the school board adopted, or is it prior to that one?
Is there much disparity in?
I think it's the one that I think it's one that got adopted prior. It is the one that the superintendent presented to the school board adopted, right? I think doing reconciliation is when the city council reconciles it, but Kevin, if I'm wrong, go ahead and clarify.
No, sir, you're correct. Councilmember, the one exception is it's reflective of what it was included in the CEON. Keep in mind the CEON comes out after the governor's proposed budget comes out, and then there's this in-between point in time. Conversations were going on with the school board about the possibility of additional state funding, also being mindful of the revenue sharing formula, the information that the real estate assessor provided in late February. So whenever that all came together, what's reflected in the proposed budget in front of you within the school's operating fund is a set-aside reserve estimating that additional state revenue, not programming it out. It's certainly something that would be amended and reconciled as a part of the city council reconciliation process based on an updated request from the school board at a future point in time. So that's just the process and where we're at in the process.
So it's fluid, but there's not much difference at this point? There's nothing glaring?
pending the decision from the state. I think the vice mayor had said that earlier. Wherever that lands right now, estimated is the 10 million into that reserve, the local funding, but I think there's also the additional special need allocation from the state. So that'll be coming forward for inclusion in City Council's consideration as part of reconciliation.
Dr. Robertson, I just want to thank you for your presentation. As I was going through here, yes, I'm a new council member, but one thing I noticed is the proposal for increased costs for homeless, education, taxi expenses, bikini, bonito. And to me, that needs to be protected. That needs to be focused on. I care about the kids and families that are experiencing homelessness. And so thank you for looking forward and addressing that, because we're going to take care of the kids. So that's more of a applaud, and thank you for looking at that.
Hey, thank you, Amelia.
Just very quickly, thank you again for what you shared with us. I'm happy about the tri-campus addition. That is important. You also mentioned about the grant with the idea.
The
what's going on
IDEA.
with that.
Mhm. So that, right now, what we are hearing is that funding is committed. There is talk that funding may be shifted from the U.S. Department of Education, possibly Home Health and Human Services, yeah. So, I mean, right now, we think that the funding will continue, but we're just mindful of that. But we think that the administration of that grant will shift agencies. And of course, that agency is also getting a reduction in workforce as well. So we're just trying to be mindful of that administration and compliance and any delays that might occur.
And I thank you for mentioning you may be able to, shift people so people don't feel right away they've lost their job.
It's definitely a priority for us.
Thank you.
And thank you all so much for coming, and let's keep this wonderful collaboration going.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, at this time, last but not
Is
least.
this the save the best for last?
Then I got caught in the mud of that.
Rocky Star?
Mr. Mayor, before you guys continue, I'd like to let the council know that we did move the remaining public safety departments to next week or some other time as far as the budget process due to timing constraints. The next voice you'll hear will be Sheriff Holcomb.
Thank you.
Mr.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, Mr. Manager, and Madam Clerk. So in full disclosure, I've been texting with the manager, and I told the manager, I said, if you don't fit me in, I'm going to make open mic night very miserable tonight. I promise you that.
And all your friends will be watching
That's
you
right.
on TV,
I have
right?
about 30 or
don't
40
think
of them out there, yeah. Yeah, so thank you, and I understand that blessed are the brief, they're invited back, so I will make this quick. I know that most of you, have seen this, so I won't make it death by PowerPoint. I've got some of my folks coming in right here, and I'll tell you right to start with, the folks coming in, your sheriff's office is something that we should all be proud of, because they stand on the front line every day and make me proud and make us all proud here at the sheriff's office. So thank you guys for sticking around and being here with us. I appreciate it. Thank you. So we'll get into the first slide, and we'll just talk about the summary. And so one important note there is 563 total full-time employees. For the record, I am down 60 sworn bodies. So the sheriff's office is down 60 bodies, and I think you'll hear from the police department later on that they're in the 50 range. So it's difficult recruiting folks to get into this line of work during this time. So there you'll see the pie chart. Most of my funding is tied up in operations, as you can imagine, with salaries and fringes. And then each of you have seen this, the operating budget summary, which breaks down what we have going on. And our change is right on par with how it has been over the past 4 or 5 years. Now we'll get into the next slide, and I'll talk about aging facility. And as you well know, Building A came online in 1976, and it's a 24-hour day operation that's starting to show its age, and we're really working hard to keep it functional. But it is an old building, and our Building B went online in 1992, and it's no spring chicken. And then 2005 for Building C. So our operation is run 24/7, as you're well aware, and so it's difficult to make sure that we keep everything up and running. So the next slide, the sheriff's workforce modification, and I'm sure some of you have gotten phone calls about this, and you read the paper this morning. I'm not doing away with the sheriff's workforce. We understand that it's a very important part of rehabilitation. But based on an audit that was done by your city auditor, we didn't think there was a lot of bang in the buck for doing the grass cutting. So we're trying to find better ways to use the inmates in the jail that are on the workforce we're going to start a painting crew inside our jail. As I said, our jail's starting to show its age. So we're going to have a constant painting crew in there that can paint and they can learn that skill. Another thing that's going to be very important to each of you, and Councilmember Rouse, I talked to the Clean Community Commission chairman about this, and he is over the moon on this. We're going to start doing litter removal throughout the city because we're starting to notice that there's a lot of areas in the city that can use some litter removal, and we can take some inmate work crews out there to city parks and city property and really make a big difference cleaning that stuff up. And I got to tell you, the inmate workforce is excited about doing that. Anytime they can get out and make a difference in the community, they're excited about that. So that's some of the initiatives we've got going with the workforce. So it's not going away. Despite what you read in the paper, it's not going away. It's sticking around, and you will still see inmates out in the workforce picking up trash and doing other things. We clean the pump houses. We go out and fix the pump houses on a yearly basis. Now, the next one that's a big cost for us is the new food service contract. And I want to thank the folks at purchasing for helping us get through this. And let me tell you this, I tried to negotiate a menu that was egg-free so we could save some money, but we had to have eggs in there, so we didn't get to save any money on that. But this is always a big one to make sure we have proper food service in our jail. You hit the next slide. So I'll go back to recruitment efforts to reduce vacancies. Listen, we're working every day, and we understand that we don't have all the answers on how to recruit these folks, but we're in the high schools, we're at the military bases, we're at the colleges. We're doing everything we can to get folks to come and work at the sheriff's office. And I noticed on Princess Anne Road at TCC, they got a new sign going up. I hope they'll let me put something up there that says Sheriff's Office is hiring, maybe, so we can get some folks down there. But any ideas you have or any thoughts you have, please forward them to us, because we're looking for 60 folks that are ready to come hard charging deputy sheriffs as soon as possible. So with that being said, that covers all of the main things on my budget. One thing I want to say is thank you for your work on the public safety pay scale. And we work so hard to avoid that compression word. And I hope that this pay raise doesn't cause the compression. Now, my understanding is there's a possibility that there might be a level left out that could create some compression. And I'm concerned about the compression coming back in with the pay scale. But we work so hard in this body to get rid of that with the pay plan. And I hope we don't have any compression creep in. So with that, that's my 5 quick slides. That's my down and dirty on the sheriff's office. And with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
Thanks, Michael. And then
Sheriff, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you. And I do have some questions. First thing I want to say is when you start that litter removal, I've got some spots.
We will. District 3 will be there.
I'm sure we all have a few spots, but we do know in our districts where some of the trouble areas are and where we get complaints. So I'd love to coordinate with your office on that.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate your initiative there. I know a lot of people will be really happy about that.
Thank you.
I have just 3 questions, and your answers can be very brief. And I'll just say them all, and then I'll stop. I'd like for you to, if you could, share a little bit more about the compression concern that you have, because I'm concerned about that too. One of the, I think the most notable initiatives related to the budget that I've been part of is working through those compression issues, and we really made up some major investments in public safety in order to address those that were really highly problematic. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more detail about that and how we can avoid exacerbating those or creating pitfalls down the road that some future council is going to have to take another big bite, and the taxpayers are going to have to fund to address those. A little pebble today creates a large boulder down the road. That's what I've learned about compression. And the other thing is, your office has done, and I know it's not reflected here, but I want to take this opportunity to say your office has done, and with your leadership, a really remarkable work in the area of mental health reform and mental health services. Most of the people who are incarcerated in your facilities suffer from mental illness.
63%.
And it's something that is very relatable to many people and many families in Virginia Beach. And the more services that we can provide through your office and others, the safer, not only the safer we will be, but the healthier we will be. And it's something that, is just very omnipresent in so many of our lives. And your office is doing some really great things in order to address those things and provide compassionate rehabilitation while maintaining safety. So I'd like you to speak about that. The other thing, this is a little bit of a personal privilege here, but you've also done really great things with arts, culture, and creative expression, which can be very therapeutic. I've seen murals in your jail, and we did a partnership at the Chrysler Museum. And when people are able to express themselves, they're validated, their experiences are validated, and maybe they can reflect upon decisions that they've made and choose a better path. So I just want to compliment you on all those things.
Thank you, Councilmember Berlucci. And yes, we had the art show at the Chrysler, and it was good, and it makes a difference in those folks' lives. It really does. Every little thing like that makes a difference. And I'll say to some of the programs we have some folks that come in there and receive a GED because we push hard for getting a GED, and it's amazing what that milestone can make in their life to get that piece of paper that said they now have a GED. So it is huge, and we do work hard on that. And back to the mental health part, nobody in the Commonwealth does it like we do at the Sheriff's Office. We have CSB in our jail. We give wraparound services when folks leave because we do understand that this mental health crisis that we're facing all over the nation, but here in Virginia Beach, the CSB came in and identified 63% of our population that suffered from some form of mental health illness. And we try to make sure that we get them connected with the resources when they get out, they get the medication they need when they get out, and make sure we make them as whole as we can. So I'm proud of my staff for that. In fact, we took several of our housing areas and created a mental health environment so that the prisoners can be in there and have mental health services. And then on the last part with the compression, as we all know, as you move each level, everything has to move. You can't leave out one spot. If everything doesn't move, then something gets left behind, and then you create that compression. And you made a perfect point. It's a pebble today, but it's a boulder tomorrow. And that we faced that in this body with our last pay parity plan that we put in place. So yeah, it's a big issue. So I just hope that we move each step so that we don't fall behind. Because what happens then is if a step doesn't get moved, then the next person comes up, they pass that step. So then you have the compression problem. So yeah, thank you for that. And that's certainly one of the things we want to make sure we get right. Thank you, Councilman.
Okay, let's do Hutch, and then we kind of got to move on.
Yeah, mine will be quick too. Just the tip of the hat to you and everybody back here, y'all.
Thank you, Councilman.
Good work. We appreciate it. Thank you. And the mental health pod, however you want to call it. Some family, we've all seen it or know about it, or maybe had somebody that used it. So it's greatly appreciated.
Yeah.
And then on the compression, I kind of got some skin in that game. So I value what you're saying there. I do believe we're looking at it on all those levels. We'll get more on that as we go along. And just, I think on the litter pickup thing, I think that's a great idea, and we were joking, myself and Councilman Berlucci, but along VB Trail, getting that started and where we're going to be going there, there's a lot of there's a lot of avenues as far as where to maybe go to first. So
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And on that same note, when I talked to the manager, and help me out, Mr. Manager, our current litter removal team is not big right now.
No, I think, Sheriff, I think it's currently maybe 4 or 5 people.
Yeah.
And then on occasion, if there's a hotspot, then we ramp up by pulling people from off of like lawn details or other services for Parks and Rec. But no, definitely we need the support.
Yeah, so help's on the way with that. We can definitely get to that. So no further questions. I thank each and every one of you. You're welcome over to the jail anytime. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
In capacity.
Okay, any liaison or council comments? Yeah, Rosemary?
Yes, I have 2 recommendations that I would like to make to the council. One is on Rudy Park. We've had there's a lot of discussions going on about that, and a lot of people are seeing it weighing in and very, very excited about it. But in this time of fiscal constraint that we need to do, I'd really like to recommend until a later point in time that we don't do the parking garage for now. That'll save quite a bit of money and free up some debt capacity, which would be helpful for some other areas. And then we can just proceed with the parking at some later date when there's a need, just like down at the convention center, there's a real need for it. They'll get that done. So that for one thing. And the second thing I'd like to mention is on the new proposed half of a penny on the meal tax. We have a lot of needs for public safety, which I think all of us know. We need ALETA, and there's a whole lot of other things, fire stations, apparatus, and all of that. And I think it would be really helpful for the public if they knew that money was going to be ear tagged or dedicated or somehow fenced so that money would be going to public safety. And when you talk about a half of a penny, so if you go out to dinner and your meal costs $100, you're talking about 50 cents. And I think our public safety is worth 50 cents when you eat out. And the other great thing about the meal tax is 40% of it's paid by our tourists, not even our own people. So they can help pay for public safety as well. So those are my 2
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And sorry.
Not a liaison, but just a moment. Some of y'all may know, not all of you are aware, that school board member Sharon Felton, her husband passed away. So wanted to just share a moment for her. Winfred Felton, his homegoing celebration was this morning. And so just sending love from the body to the Felton family as she's with them today. So just wanted to.
Yeah, I was at the service and there was a tremendous outpouring of love for this guy and support for him. Yeah. Okay, Amelia?
Stacy.
Oh, Stacy, you were next? Okay. And yes, I attended the wake. I had meetings right this morning, but it's very close to her, always every day. Today we had a meeting and with the town center. And I wanted to share that what we want to do is to look into expanding the eligible project scope of the town center TIF during reconciliation. To do this, staff will need to publish notification regarding a public hearing. I'd like to see if City Council has any concerns with us looking into this as a possibility during budget reconciliation.
Okay, Patrick?
And Mr. Mayor, so we met with town center stakeholders, and one of the requests is to expand the scope of the current existing TIF ordinance to allow for the TIF to take on capital repairs in the future. For example, currently right now, the scope of the TIF is for new projects, right? But as we approach 20 years, we have aging infrastructure that now needs to be addressed. And rather than use general fund resources to address that, one of the ideas is possibly using some of the capacity within the TIF to renovate parking garages that may possibly need support in the future. There's no plan for anything right now at the moment, but there's some broken elevators that we don't have a resource for because remember the TIF, parking garages are not under the Parking Enterprise Fund, right? And the SSD, as we previously briefed, does not have capacity to support the fixing and the repair of these assets that the city has. So in the future, we would like to be able to possibly use the TIF fund balance to cover some of those expenses in the TIF boundary.
Okay, Josh and Cash, and then we got to get into close.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to acknowledge the community about Pebble turning into a boulder over the last several years. I want to let you all know that the Lindhaven boat ramp has been a continuous source of challenge and disruption to the neighborhood in Ocean Park. There are folks, the car clubs come and I know we've got probably 3 or 4 of these spots or more in the city where they come and they do donuts and they disrupt the neighborhood and they, it's just a serious public safety concern for the neighborhood and the Bayfront. We've tried a couple different ways to skin the cat over the years, and I want to thank the manager. I want to thank the Parks and Rec director, public safety, Public Works. Everybody has been in lockstep along the way these last couple of years trying to manage what is really a very difficult facility because we bought the facility using state grant money years and years ago, and tied to that purchase was a requirement that it remain open 24/7, 365. And different user groups have become accustomed to using it, including people who use it like fishermen at night, commercial fishermen. So just want to let the community know that we are, looking at increased signage in the neighborhood to help boat traffic exit safely, increased hours for personnel to cover the area. But I just want to let you know that that staff and your council person are on it, and we're trying our very best.
Okay, Cash.
Okay, I'll be quick. Being a liaison on the Public Library Board, very important, Dr. Knight wanted me to tell you all of the great things that the library has won. And she says now for some good news from the library. They've won the Impactful Technology Use Award, Outstanding Program for Kids Awards, the Libby Lewis Award, and Standards of Excellence. Virginia Beach Public Library attained the silver level again. And so that's important. I just want you guys to know that the public library is winning big time.
Look how much they're doing with their liaison. Good stuff. Okay.
I just got that.
At this point, we'll do that. We'll do this during appointments.
You don't want to announce it.
No. Wait. I'll tell you real quick, I'm going to put together a task force to help Rosemary out with the task force on fixing up Atlantic Avenue. Chuck Caton, Bill Gambrell, Deepak Nakanini, Mike Mausch, John Zirkle, Hashap Barat, and Kate Pittman. So we want to get this going. So we're,
And this is a mayor's task force.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
All right, consent.
Consent, I don't think we have any speakers. So, anybody need to move forward, the consent? Hutch, did you?
Good.
Okay.
We're all good on that? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by section 2.2, 3711A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes. Legal matters, consultation with legal counsel, and briefings by staff members or consultants pertaining to actual probable litigation, where such consultation or reading in an open meeting would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body pursuant to section 2.23711A7, and that would is Scott Memorial United Methodist Church versus City of Virginia Beach and Atlantic Park. And then publicly held properties, discussion or considerations of acquisition of real property for public purpose or the disposition of publicly held property. where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body and pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A3, and that's District 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. No 7. Okay.
No, two.
No 2. Okay. Personnel matters,
They don't want
discussion,
us.
considerations, and interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining or resignation, or specific officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2, 3711A1, and that's boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Second.
All right.
Aye.
That's okay.
Aye.
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 Are you the liaison to process
Aye.
improvement?
Okay, thank you. We're recessed into